their crews lost to time, or a secret weapon, so powerful it could have changed the course of history. Yet it vanished, along with its creators, into the shadows. These are just a few of the unanswered questions that haunt the legacy of WW2. What if the war's true story is still waiting to be told? What if the history we know only scratches the surface? For the next 3 hours, we'll delve into these unsolved mysteries, peeling back the layers of time to reveal the secrets that still echo through history. So sit back, relax, and let's dive deeper into the unknown. In the remote corridors of history, few questions linger with as much intrigue and unease as the mysterious weapons developed by Nazi Germany during World War II. As the war raged across Europe, a series of dark and twisted projects emerged, each one shrouded in secrecy and ambition. Were these just desperate attempts to outmatch the Allies, or were they part of a deeper, more unsettling plan? In the mountains of Bavaria, in hidden laboratories, and aboard forgotten submarines, scientists were working feverishly on devices that, if completed, could have changed the course of the war and the world. Imagine stepping into a hidden hangar, deep inside the heart of a German military complex. The air is thick with the smell of oil and metal, and the ground beneath your feet vibrates with the hum of machinery. All around you, strange objects and mechanical beasts are taking form, machines that defy explanation, weapons unlike anything the world had seen before. The air is heavy with the weight of history, and the men who worked here knew they were on the edge of something extraordinary. Yet, few of these creations ever saw the battlefield. Some were destroyed before they could be tested. Others were abandoned, hidden from sight by a regime in decline. One of the most notorious projects was the V2 rocket, a weapon that soared through the skies at speeds that were previously unimaginable. Its sleek, menacing shape captured the imagination of both its creators and its enemies. Designed by the brilliant yet erratic engineer Wernher von Braun, the V2 was intended to strike fear into the hearts of the Allies, a weapon that could deliver devastation from the skies. The rocket was a technical marvel, a glimpse into the future of warfare. It could travel faster than the speed of sound, reaching targets across vast distances with terrifying precision. But for all its power, it raised more questions than answers. Why, with all of Nazi Germany's resources, was the V2 developed only in the final years of the war? Was it a last-ditch effort, or did the Nazis already have weapons far more advanced, hidden away in the shadows? As we move beyond the V2, a deeper, darker mystery begins to emerge, a web of secret projects that may have gone unnoticed by the world at the time. The Nazis were not just developing advanced rockets, they were experimenting with technologies that seemed to come from a different, almost alien reality. One such weapon, known only as the Nazi Bell, remains a subject of heated debate and speculation. The Bell, or Die Glocke, was purported to be a cylindrical object, roughly 12 feet high, and said to have been designed for anti-gravity and time manipulation experiments. According to those who claim to have seen it, the bell emitted a strange, glowing aura and created a high-pitched sound that could be heard from miles away. Its purpose, however, remains unknown. Some say it was a weapon capable of disrupting the laws of physics. Others believe it was part of an effort to create a time machine, a device capable of manipulating time itself. Yet, despite countless rumors and conspiracy theories, no physical evidence of the bell has ever been conclusively found. Was it a myth, a product of post-war propaganda, or was it a genuine part of the Nazi regime's quest for world domination? The reports are fragmented, sometimes contradictory, leaving behind more questions than answers. Some believe the bell's existence was covered up by the Allies after the war, who feared the potential consequences of its technology. Others suggest that it was never more than a fleeting idea, an ambitious project that failed before it could be realized. Beyond these fantastical projects, Nazi scientists were also focused on more practical, but equally terrifying developments. One of the most mysterious of these was the development of the UFO phenomenon. For years, rumors have persisted that the Nazis were working on advanced flying saucer-like crafts designed to outperform any Allied aircraft. Some researchers suggest that these Die Glocke-like machines were not just theoretical, but were in fact being tested in remote parts of Europe. The Germans, they argue, were not simply trying to build rockets, but were instead attempting to create craft capable of vertical takeoff, similar to modern-day jet fighters. Other records suggest that the Nazis experimented with electromagnetic fields, attempting to harness their power for military applications. One such project was the Haunebu, a supposed flying disc that many believe was capable of reaching astonishing speeds and maneuvering in ways that modern aircraft cannot match. However, much of this remains speculative, with little hard evidence to support these claims. Could these technological advances have been part of a larger, more sinister plan to develop advanced weaponry? Or were they simply the byproduct of a government gripped by megalomania, willing to explore any means necessary to achieve victory? It is important to remember that some of the most successful Nazi innovations were grounded in practicality. The jet fighter, for example, was a breakthrough in military aviation, designed to combat Allied bombers. Yet, as advanced as it was also a sign of the desperation that had taken hold of the German war effort. As the Allies began to take control of more territory, Nazi scientists were forced to abandon many of their projects. Was this simply a matter of insufficient resources, or was there something more ominous at play? What might have happened if the Nazis had won the war and had the time and resources to develop these secret weapons to their full potential? In the final days of the war, as the Allies advanced into Germany, many of these secret projects were hastily abandoned, destroyed, or hidden away. Some of the scientists, like Werner von Braun, were captured by the Americans and brought to work on post-war projects, including the U.S. space program. Others disappeared into the chaos of war, leaving behind only whispers of what they may have known. But the questions remain. Was the Nazi regime truly on the verge of discovering technologies that could have altered the balance of power in the world? Or were these stories merely a product of wartime paranoia and myth-making? Some suggest that the answers are out there, waiting to be uncovered, hidden in the ruins of forgotten bunkers or locked away in government archives. Others believe that the Nazis may have stumbled upon something far more dangerous, something that, if fully realized, could have changed the course of history. What we do know is this: the weapons of Nazi Germany were not just tools of war. They were symbols of ambition, fear, and a desire for control over forces far greater than the world had ever seen. Whether these secret weapons were ever fully realized, or whether they remain buried in the pages of history, is a question that continues to haunt us today. And perhaps, in the shadows of the past, there are still secrets waiting to be uncovered. The ocean has always held an air of mystery, its vast expanse concealing more secrets than we can imagine. For centuries, its depths have swallowed ships, leaving behind only whispers of their fate. During World War II, it wasn't just the relentless tide of combat that claimed vessels. In the chaotic, unpredictable theater of war, some ships, and the men aboard them, seemed to vanish without a trace. Was this the result of the cruel forces of war, or was there something else at play? Could ghost ships, vessels that appeared out of nowhere and then vanished as quickly, be responsible for some of these disappearances? Picture this. The year is 1942, and the war in the Pacific is in full swing. The United States Navy is engaged in a brutal battle with Imperial Japan, and the waters off the coasts of the Pacific Islands are teeming with activity. Then, without warning, a seemingly intact ship drifts into view, its sails or flags undisturbed, its deck eerily silent. No crew, no signs of struggle, and no survivors. Such eerie sightings became increasingly common as the war raged on, with several naval vessels mysteriously disappearing, only to have their wreckage appear days or even weeks later, often far from where they had been last seen. One of the most perplexing examples was the disappearance of the USS Cyclops in 1918, long before the Second World War, but the legend of this ghost ship persisted well into WWII. The Cyclops, a massive collier ship, was on a routine voyage from Barbados to Baltimore, carrying 306 men and a load of manganese ore. After sending its last communication, the ship simply vanished, never to be heard from again. No wreckage was found, and no survivors ever emerged. Theories surrounding its disappearance ranged from sabotage to mechanical failure, but the absence of any debris, the utter silence of the waters it had crossed, remains haunting. Fast forward to WWII, and similar mysteries continued to surface. In the Pacific Theater, the USS Juno was another ship that became infamous for its tragic and mysterious demise. The ship was hit by a torpedo during the Battle of Guadalcanal in November 1942, and it sank quickly, taking 687 lives with it. But what followed was equally unsettling. Some survivors, clinging to floating debris, reported seeing other ships, aided by shadows or strange glowing lights, floating aimlessly nearby, before disappearing without a trace. The reports were so bizarre that some began to wonder, was there something supernatural about these disappearances? Or were the ships themselves somehow caught in a web of unexplained phenomena? There's no denying that warfare in the 20th century was more chaotic than ever before. With advancing technology, new weapons, and complex strategies, countless ships were sent into harm's way, their fates often sealed by the sudden whims of battle. And yet, not all these disappearances can be so easily explained. One of the most mysterious phenomena was the phenomenon of ghost ships, vessels that appeared seemingly out of nowhere and then simply vanished. Throughout the war, sailors spoke of seeing ships, some well-known, others unknown, drifting along seemingly without purpose, their crews either dead or gone. At times, the ships would appear in locations far from where they were expected, without any visible sign of damage or distress. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they would vanish, leaving only strange tales and questions behind. One such case was the SS Orang Medan, a Dutch cargo ship that became the subject of one of the most enduring maritime mysteries of the 20th century. According to accounts, the Orang Medan sent out a distress signal while traveling through the Strait of Malacca in 1947. The message was chilling in its brevity. All officers, including the captain, are dead, lying in the chart room and bridge. Probably whole crew is dead. No further details were provided. After the signal was received, a nearby American ship, the Silver Star, came to the Orang Medan's aid. When they boarded the vessel, they found the entire crew dead, frozen in grotesque, unnatural positions, their faces contorted in expressions of sheer terror. Strangely, there were no signs of injury, no wounds that could explain their deaths. Even more bizarrely, the ship itself was found to be in perfect working order, with no indication of what had caused the catastrophe. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the Orang Medan disappeared again, sinking without a trace while being towed to safety. Was this a simple accident? A chemical leak, perhaps? Or an onboard fire? Or was there something far more unsettling at play? Could the Orang Medan have been caught in the grip of something not yet understood? Some dark and unexplained force that caused the deaths of its crew? The disappearance remains a riddle, one that has baffled researchers for decades, leaving open the possibility that the answers lie in a place beyond conventional understanding. As we move through the years, the tales of ghost ships only multiply. The strange cases continue to appear. Stories of entire fleets being swallowed by the sea and ships that vanish into thin air. But what is the explanation for this strange phenomenon? Were these vessels lost to the ravages of war, or could they be the result of something more enigmatic? Some suggest that the disappearances might have been due to navigational errors, miscommunication, or the sudden onslaught of natural disasters. Yet, even when wreckage is discovered, it sometimes appears in places where it should not have been, adding another layer of mystery to these already unsettling tales. Could these ghost ships be the result of wartime paranoia and misreporting? After all, stress and trauma during the war were profound, and sailors, often stranded in hostile, unfamiliar waters for months at a time, were known to experience hallucinations and delusions. Yet the eerie consistency with which these stories appeared in the historical record invites a closer examination. There is something undeniable about the recurring reports, the unnerving patterns that suggest the truth may be more complex than anyone has acknowledged. One speculative theory is that these ships could have been involved in some form of time slip, where ships inadvertently find themselves drifting into different time periods or dimensions, like fleeting shadows in a world that only occasionally intersects with our own. While this might sound far-fetched, the sheer number of similar reports lends an air of credibility to the idea that something otherworldly could be at play. Still, the truth behind the lost Navy remains elusive. Were these ships merely victims of wartime chaos? Or were they caught in a deeper, more mysterious force that defied explanation? Perhaps the answer lies in the murky waters of the past, waiting to be uncovered in the ruins of forgotten battles or hidden beneath the ocean's depths. The question lingers, unresolved, like the endless stretch of sea itself, dark, boundless, and filled with secrets that may never fully emerge. The story of Nazi Germany's ambitions during World War II is filled with secrets, hidden weapons, clandestine projects, and plans so audacious they seem almost unreal. But what if some of these projects, and the quest for world domination, reached beyond the borders of Europe? What if, in the frozen wilderness of Antarctica, an entirely different chapter of the Nazi regime's dark history remained hidden, waiting to be uncovered? Antarctica, a land of ice and snow, where the sun barely rises for months on end and temperatures drop to unimaginable lows. For most of the world, it has always been a place of scientific research and isolation, untouched by the horrors of war. But what if this cold expanse was not just a barren wilderness, but the site of a secret Nazi base, one built by the regime in the final years of the war, far from Allied eyes and beyond the reach of conventional warfare? The seeds of this theory were planted in the aftermath of World War II, when a strange and unsettling report surfaced. It was said that, in 1938, a German expedition led by the Nazi regime had set foot in Antarctica. This mission, codenamed Operation High Jump, involved a large contingent of scientists, military personnel, and vessels, more than 4,000 men in total. The official purpose of the expedition was to explore and map the Antarctic region, yet rumors quickly began to swirl that the Nazis had other, more ambitious plans. Some even speculated that they were establishing a base, perhaps a refuge from the war, or a location to conduct research into the occult and advanced technologies. But what if the story didn't end there? In the years following the war, reports began to surface suggesting that this base may not have been just a temporary outpost, but a fully functioning and strategically important location, still operating long after the end of the conflict. Stories began to emerge of a mysterious base buried beneath the ice, one that housed cutting-edge Nazi technology and potentially even weapons that could change the course of history. To understand this mystery, we need to turn back the clock to the summer of 1947. In the aftermath of the war, as the world was still reeling from the devastation, a U.S. Navy expedition, Operation High Jump, was launched to Antarctica. The operation, led by Admiral Richard Byrd, was initially billed as a scientific mission to map the largely unexplored territory. But what happened during those weeks remains shrouded in mystery. According to some reports, Byrd's team encountered strange phenomena, unexplained weather patterns, unusual electromagnetic fields, and even encounters with unidentified flying objects. These claims, though never officially confirmed, have fueled speculation that Byrd's mission uncovered something far beyond what the public had been told. Could the Nazis, in their final desperate days, have established a secret outpost in the icy wastes of the Antarctic? The evidence is scant, and much of it relies on the accounts of a few individuals and later conspiracy theorists. Yet there is no denying that the Nazis had a long-standing interest in the far reaches of the Earth. Before the war, German expeditions had ventured to both the Arctic and Antarctic regions, studying the terrain and exploring the potential for strategic military bases. The Nazis' fascination with these remote areas only deepened during the war, especially as their ambitions began to falter in Europe. Could they have turned to the frozen continent, seeking refuge in the extreme isolation it offered? Several elements of the story add to the intrigue. One such claim centers around a mysterious location known as Neuschwabenland, a region of Antarctica that was reportedly surveyed by Nazi expeditions in 1938. According to some sources, the Nazis sent a fleet of ships to this part of the continent to explore and claim territory. They reportedly named the region New Swabia, and some even suggest that they began constructing underground bases there, possibly designed to house advanced weapons, research stations, and even entire fleets of submarines. But despite these tantalizing accounts, there is little concrete evidence to support the existence of such a base. Historians and researchers have scoured documents from the time, yet no definitive proof has ever been uncovered. The few photographs that exist from the 1938 expedition show nothing more than barren, snow-covered landscapes and a few rudimentary structures. The idea that the Nazis established a secret base beneath the ice is largely based on the word of a few individuals, most notably post-war accounts of Nazi scientists who claimed to have worked on such projects. Could they have been exaggerating their roles in the Nazi regime, or were they covering up something far more sinister? It is important to consider the context of the time. In the final years of the war, as Germany's defeat became imminent, many high-ranking Nazis sought ways to escape the Allies' grasp. Some fled to South America, others to the far reaches of the world. The idea of an Antarctic base, hidden from the world's eyes, was not entirely outlandish. In fact, there were rumors that high-ranking Nazi officials, including Adolf Hitler himself, may have planned to escape to a secret hideout in the South Pole where they could continue their work in safety. Could it be that these secretive plans included the establishment of a technological outpost, perhaps involving secret weapons research, or even a Nazi enclave that remained active well into the post-war period? Then there is the question of the technology. During the war, Nazi Germany was at the forefront of scientific research in many areas: rocketry, jet propulsion, and even early work on nuclear technology. What if, in the remote icy plains of Antarctica, they were conducting experiments in secret, developing weapons or technologies that would have given them the upper hand in the war? The idea of such advanced research being hidden beneath the ice seems almost too fantastical to believe. But then again, the entire story of Nazi secret weapons and their obsession with the occult and the supernatural gives us cause to question what we know about the past. In the years following the war, reports surfaced that some of the Nazi scientists had been brought to the United States as part of Operation Paperclip to continue their work on American soil. Could these scientists have been involved in a larger conspiracy, one that extended beyond the war and into the shadowy world of post-war research? Were they secretly continuing their work on advanced technology, drawing upon the knowledge and materials gathered during their time in Antarctica? As intriguing as these theories may be, the evidence remains inconclusive. Could a Nazi base really have existed in the frozen wilderness of Antarctica? The mystery persists, unresolved, as more and more layers of history are peeled back. While some believe that the truth is out there, buried beneath the ice, others argue that the evidence simply isn't there to support such a wild theory. Whatever the truth may be, the questions remain. What could the Nazis have been hiding in the far reaches of the world, in a place so remote and inhospitable? Were they simply planning an escape, or were they conducting research that could have changed the course of history? Perhaps, like so many mysteries of World War II, the answers are lost to time, hidden beneath layers of ice and secrets that are yet to be uncovered. On July 20th, 1944, the world's most infamous dictator came perilously close to meeting his end. Adolf Hitler, the architect of World War II and the figurehead of Nazi Germany's brutal regime, found himself at the center of an assassination attempt that would have forever altered the course of history. A conspiracy, led by high-ranking officers within the German military, sought to end the war and the Nazi regime by killing the man at its helm. This operation, known as Operation Valkyrie, is one of the most dramatic and chilling moments of the war. But even now, more than 75 years later, questions remain about the true motivations behind the plot, the extent of its support, and the secrets still hidden beneath its surface. The plot itself was audacious in its simplicity. The conspirators, led by Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, aimed to kill Hitler during a routine meeting at his military headquarters, known as the Wolf's Lair, located deep within the forests of East Prussia. Von Stauffenberg, a decorated officer, had grown disillusioned with the Nazi regime after witnessing its atrocities and the relentless destruction it had brought upon Europe. Like many others within the German military, he believed that the only way to restore Germany and save it from total annihilation was to rid the country of Hitler's tyrannical rule. But what makes this story so enigmatic is not just the boldness of the assassination attempt itself, but the strange, almost surreal chain of events that followed. The plan was meticulously prepared. The conspirators were determined, and for a brief moment it seemed as though victory was within reach. Von Stauffenberg, armed with a briefcase bomb, had an opportunity to kill Hitler in his office on that fateful day, but despite his best efforts, the assassination failed. The bomb detonated, but Hitler, surprisingly, survived, suffering only minor injuries. In the wake of the failed attempt, the conspirators were quickly betrayed, captured, and executed, and the entire operation crumbled. Yet, even in its failure, Operation Valkyrie has left behind a trail of unanswered questions and lingering mysteries. The immediate narrative, of course, tells the tale of the would-be assassins who were swiftly crushed, their names and ambitions erased from the historical record as a result of Hitler's vengeance. But as with so many critical moments of history, the story doesn't end there. The true extent of the conspiracy, the reasons behind its failure, and the untold secrets surrounding it still linger, beckoning those who dare to search for deeper answers. In the aftermath of the failed assassination attempt, the Nazis launched a brutal crackdown, arresting thousands of people connected to the plot. But was the conspiracy really just the work of a few disgruntled officers? Could it be that there were far more people involved, with deeper connections within the Nazi regime than we have been led to believe? Some historians have suggested that Operation Valkyrie was not only about eliminating Hitler, but also about taking control of the country, particularly as the war's outcome began to look increasingly grim. There were even whispers that the conspirators were hoping to negotiate peace with the Allies, which, if successful, would have spared Germany from total destruction. However, the assassination failed, and the plotters were swiftly wiped out in the aftermath. What remains is a chilling, unanswered question. What would have happened if it had succeeded? Would Germany have surrendered, avoiding the devastation of the final months of the war? Would history have been rewritten entirely? Or was the war too far gone for such a peace to be achieved, even with Hitler's death? These are the questions that still haunt the legacy of Operation Valkyrie. But the questions surrounding the assassination attempt do not stop there. Beyond the fates of von Stauffenberg and his fellow conspirators, the legacy of Operation Valkyrie has given rise to numerous other mysteries. The plot itself was only the visible tip of a much larger iceberg. What if there were hidden motivations, unseen forces, or intelligence operations at play with far-reaching consequences that we have yet to uncover? One of the most intriguing aspects of the plot is the involvement of the German resistance. There were factions within the resistance who were well aware that Hitler's demise was the key to saving Germany from the ruinous war he had started. But these factions were often divided, with conflicting ideas on how to achieve their goal. Some wanted a negotiated peace, while others wanted to completely dismantle the Nazi system and purge the country of its criminal leadership. These fractures within the resistance were part of the reason why Operation Valkyrie ultimately failed. But the divisions also suggest that there were deeper currents of dissent within the German military, currents that have not been fully explored or understood. The failure of the assassination attempt also raised questions about the roles of those in positions of power who were not directly involved in the plot. How much did the other high-ranking officials of the Nazi regime know about the conspiracy? Did certain members of the German military secretly support the operation, or did they actively work to prevent it from succeeding? These are questions that have been largely ignored or suppressed in the years following the war. The reasons for this are not entirely clear, but it is possible that certain truths have been deliberately hidden from the public, either to preserve the image of the German military or to protect those who might have been complicit in the conspiracy. Another layer to this story concerns the role of the Allies in the events surrounding Operation Valkyrie. While the conspirators sought to end the war and bring about a negotiated peace, the Allies, particularly the United States and Britain, had made it clear that their primary goal was unconditional surrender from Nazi Germany. Had Operation Valkyrie succeeded, it is possible that it would have disrupted the Allied war strategy, throwing a wrench in the diplomatic and military negotiations already in progress. In fact, some scholars have speculated that the failure of the plot was almost a foregone conclusion because the Allies did not want a negotiated peace. They wanted total victory, and they wanted it at any cost. Of course, there is also the more tantalizing and fringe theory that suggests there may have been deeper, more secretive motives at play. Could Operation Valkyrie have been merely a cover for a more radical, high-stakes maneuver to take control of Germany's war machine? Was the plot simply a distraction? A carefully orchestrated performance designed to make the Allies believe that a faction of the German military wanted peace? These theories, while speculative, underscore the complexity of the operation and the vast, untapped potential for secrets that remain hidden in the shadows of history. In the end, the questions surrounding Operation Valkyrie persist because so many aspects of the plot, its motivations, and its aftermath remain shrouded in secrecy. Despite decades of research and historical inquiry, we are left with a series of tantalizing fragments, clues that hint at a much larger, still unfinished story. Was Operation Valkyrie truly just a desperate attempt to end the war? Or was it part of a more complex web of intrigue and political maneuvering that has yet to be fully understood? As we delve deeper into the mystery, we are forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. Some secrets may never be revealed. The truth, buried beneath layers of history, may remain forever out of reach. As the war raged across Europe, there was one moment, a brief but tantalizing point in time, when it seemed like history itself could have shifted in an entirely different direction. It was 1940, and Nazi Germany, having swiftly conquered most of the continent, turned its gaze toward Britain. The Wehrmacht, under Adolf Hitler's orders, set its sights on an audacious goal, the invasion of Great Britain. The plan was codenamed Operation Sea Lion, and its failure marked one of the most crucial turning points of World War II. Yet, despite the well-documented failure, the questions surrounding Operation Sea Lion remain shrouded in mystery, with elements of the plan and its origins that continue to confound historians even today. On the surface, Operation Sea Lion was a straightforward military strategy. Hitler's plan was to launch a full-scale invasion of the United Kingdom, crossing the English Channel and landing forces on the southern coast of England. The operation required the Germans to achieve air superiority over Britain, neutralizing the Royal Air Force, RAF, and securing control of the skies in order to allow the amphibious assault to proceed. Once the Germans gained a foothold, they intended to capture key ports, secure vital infrastructure, and eventually force the British government to surrender. What makes this story so compelling is not only the audacity of the plan, but the extraordinary set of circumstances that led to its failure. The Battle of Britain, the first major military campaign fought entirely by air, was the crucial turning point. In the summer and fall of 1940, the RAF, despite being outnumbered and facing overwhelming odds, managed to hold its ground. British pilots, aided by radar technology and a deeply ingrained sense of national survival, thwarted the Luftwaffe's attempts to break the RAF and pave the way for the invasion. But here lies the mystery. Why did the Germans, despite their military prowess and technological superiority, fail so spectacularly at Operation Sea Lion? The answer, as commonly accepted, is the failure of the Luftwaffe to defeat the RAF. But this simple explanation doesn't fully account for the many oddities surrounding the plan, nor does it address the deeper mysteries that have since emerged. Some historians argue that Operation Sea Lion was never meant to succeed in the first place. This theory suggests that the invasion was merely a bluff, an audacious gambit designed to intimidate Britain and possibly even force them into negotiations. According to this line of thinking, Hitler never truly expected the invasion to take place, but rather intended to use it as a psychological weapon to weaken British resolve. Could it be that Operation Sea Lion was less a military strategy and more a piece of grand psychological warfare? Adding to this speculation is the fact that after the initial setbacks in the Battle of Britain, Hitler seemed to shift his focus. Instead of intensifying the campaign against Britain, the Nazi leadership turned its attention to the Soviet Union, ultimately launching Operation Barbarossa in June 1941. The shift in focus from Britain to Russia has puzzled many, leading some to wonder if there was an ulterior motive behind Hitler's decision to abandon the invasion. Could it be that the Germans never had the full capability to launch Sea Lion, even if the RAF had been defeated? Were there deeper strategic considerations, such as a belief that Britain would eventually sue for peace, that made an invasion less critical? As we dig deeper into the mechanics of Operation Sea Lion, the questions only multiply. The logistics of the operation were, from the outset, staggeringly complicated. The Germans, despite their military expertise, faced enormous challenges in transporting the necessary troops, equipment, and supplies across the English Channel. In the days before modern amphibious warfare and the kind of large-scale naval invasions seen later in the war, the logistics of launching an invasion of Britain were daunting. The Luftwaffe's inability to secure air superiority only made these challenges more insurmountable. But this raises another key question. How could such a high-ranking, well-prepared military force have failed to plan adequately for one of the most critical aspects of warfare, the ability to land and sustain an invasion? There are some who believe that Operation Sea Lion was, in fact, a much more complex operation than we fully understand. According to this theory, the Germans had a series of secret plans and contingencies in place to overcome these logistical obstacles. Contingencies that remain largely unknown. Some have even speculated that there were elements of the German military that had developed more advanced amphibious technology or techniques that were never fully realized because of the sudden change in focus to the Eastern Front. Could these secrets, buried deep within the Reich's military archives, hold the key to unlocking what Operation Sea Lion could have been? And if they exist, what secrets did the Germans hide about the full extent of their plans? Even more mysterious are the reports suggesting that the Nazis were exploring unconventional technologies in relation to Operation Sea Lion. Could Hitler's interest in the occult and supernatural have played a role in the planning of the invasion? Some fringe theories argue that the Germans may have been experimenting with advanced technologies, like secret weapons or even early forms of psychological warfare, that could have tipped the balance in their favor. Could they have been developing new types of weapons to make the invasion a reality? Weapons that would have been powerful enough to overpower Britain's defenses? These theories, while not widely accepted, continue to spark debate among historians and military enthusiasts alike. Another key mystery revolves around the intelligence the Germans possessed leading up to Operation Sea Lion. At the time, Britain was not only fighting for its survival, but was also one of the most powerful intelligence hubs in the world. The British had broken the German Enigma code, and their spies had infiltrated key areas of the Nazi regime. The question that remains unanswered is, did the Germans fully understand the extent of British intelligence capabilities? Could they have been deceived into believing that an invasion was possible, only to find out that Britain's preparation and resistance were far stronger than anticipated? In addition, there are peculiar stories surrounding the secretive operations of Nazi spies in Britain during this period. Accounts suggest that certain Nazi agents may have infiltrated British society, gathering critical intelligence and sowing confusion. Could some of these spies have played a hidden role in manipulating the Germans into proceeding with Operation Sea Lion when they knew it was doomed to fail? The extent of espionage and subterfuge during this period is still a subject of much speculation. Even today, some question whether Operation Sea Lion was more than just an ill-fated military campaign. Was it a calculated ruse designed to deceive the Allies? A far-reaching attempt at psychological warfare meant to divide the British resolve and create confusion among their ranks? Or was it simply a failed military venture, one that, despite its shortcomings, holds secrets that have yet to be fully explored? What remains clear is that, while the failure of Operation Sea Lion is a well-documented fact, the mystery surrounding the operation is far from resolved. The complexities of Nazi strategy, the intelligence games played on both sides, and the technological and logistical obstacles that the Germans faced still leave many questions unanswered. As we continue to search for the hidden truths of World War II, Operation Sea Lion stands as a reminder that some of the most significant moments in history are shrouded in uncertainty. Some mysteries, it seems, may never be fully unraveled. It is one of the great unsolved mysteries of World War II, the curious case of 20,000 missing German soldiers. Unlike other wartime disappearances, this story isn't one of isolated incidents or individual heroism gone wrong. Instead, it raises unsettling questions about a significant number of soldiers who seemingly vanished into thin air. Despite extensive research, official records, and countless investigations, the truth behind their disappearance remains elusive. It all began in the final stages of the war. As Nazi Germany teetered on the brink of collapse, the fate of its soldiers became more uncertain with each passing day. By early 1945, the Allies were advancing on all fronts, and Hitler's regime was unraveling faster than anyone could have predicted. In the chaos of these final days, a staggering number of German soldiers vanished, disappeared without a trace, their fates unknown. This mass disappearance occurred during the Soviet offensive in the east, particularly around the region of East Prussia. As Soviet forces advanced through the crumbling German defenses, many soldiers were caught in the middle of one of the most ferocious and decisive campaigns of the war. Entire battalions were cut off from their command, forced to retreat in disarray, leaving no survivors to tell the tale. Some estimates suggest that between 20,000 and 25,000 soldiers vanished in these final moments of combat, yet there is little in the way of concrete answers to explain their disappearance. Officially, the story behind these lost soldiers is one of confusion and logistical failure. Some were thought to have been killed in combat, others captured by the Soviets, while many may have simply gotten lost or deserted. Yet, as with so many other historical events, the truth is much murkier than the official accounts suggest. How can so many soldiers, with so much military infrastructure, simply disappear without leaving a trace? One theory holds that these soldiers may have been captured by the Soviets. After all, the Red Army was notorious for taking prisoners during the final phases of the war. Thousands of Germans were taken prisoner and sent to Soviet labor camps, never to be seen again. But this doesn't fully explain the absence of any records regarding these 20,000 men. If they had been captured, why would there be so few accounts of their fate? Was it possible that the Soviets, faced with their own challenges in managing so many prisoners, decided to simply eliminate them? Or did these soldiers escape the grasp of the Soviet forces, disappearing into the landscape in search of safety? Another possibility is desertion. In the chaos of the final days of the war, many German soldiers, demoralized, weary, and aware of the inevitable collapse of the Nazi regime, might have chosen to abandon their posts. Desertion was a well-documented issue in the final stages of the war, as soldiers realized that the cause was lost. But the numbers involved here are staggering. Could it really be that 20,000 soldiers simply walked away from their duties without a word, vanishing without a trace? While desertion is always a part of war, this theory doesn't fully explain why so many disappeared from one concentrated area. There are also more fringe theories that suggest something far more mysterious. Could these soldiers have been the victims of an even darker fate? As the war drew to a close, the Nazis were desperate to hide their darkest secrets, many of which had to do with their military research and technological advancements. Some have speculated that these missing soldiers might have been subjected to secret experiments, or that they were part of a cover-up, erased from history for reasons that remain classified to this day. Was there something far more sinister at play? A secret program or project that demanded the disappearance of so many soldiers, perhaps linked to the various special or classified operations being carried out by the German military during the war? Another peculiar aspect of this mystery is the lack of solid evidence about where these soldiers might have gone. One theory suggests that they may have been absorbed into different branches of the military, pushed into other units, or even relocated without any documentation. There are those who believe that the soldiers were deliberately hidden, not killed, but rather forced into secretive roles to avoid post-war punishment or to assist in Germany's post-war reconstruction. This would imply a coordinated effort to remove these soldiers from public view, but without direct proof, it remains speculation. The circumstances surrounding the disappearance of these 20,000 soldiers were further compounded by the complete breakdown of the German military structure during the final weeks of the war. As the Nazi regime collapsed, communication lines were severed, military records were destroyed, and the survivors were scattered across Europe. The lack of an organized surrender or a proper evacuation plan meant that many soldiers were left behind, lost to history. In the chaos of fleeing from the Allies or the Soviets, their stories became fragmented, and no one was left to account for their disappearance. There is also the possibility that, in the fog of war, many of these soldiers simply perished without any record. The brutal conditions on the Eastern Front, the constant movement of armies, and the ruthless final battles all left a landscape of destruction. Soldiers who fell in the chaos of battle, or were overwhelmed by retreating forces, could have been buried in mass graves, their identities erased by the circumstances. The lack of documentation surrounding this period makes it almost impossible to confirm the fate of each individual soldier. Could it be that their bodies were never recovered, their names lost forever in the turmoil of the closing months of the war? Interestingly, some have suggested that these missing soldiers may have played a more significant role in post-war Germany. In the confusion of the post-war era, certain groups of soldiers may have joined resistance movements or even gone underground, taking on new identities to avoid capture or punishment. Some historical accounts suggest that a number of Nazi officers, particularly those involved in secretive operations, managed to escape justice by disappearing into the shadows of a divided Germany. There are also unsettling rumors that the disappearance of these 20,000 soldiers may have been the result of a larger cover-up, possibly orchestrated by the Nazi leadership itself. In the final days of the war, the Third Reich had many secrets, scientific projects, military operations, and political schemes that it was desperate to protect. Some theorists suggest that these missing soldiers were simply erased from the historical record in order to prevent future revelations about the darker side of Nazi research or military tactics. This theory ties into the ongoing mystery of the many secrets that Nazi Germany attempted to bury before its final defeat. As with many aspects of World War II, the case of the 20,000 missing German soldiers is wrapped in layers of uncertainty, secrecy, and conflicting accounts. Whether they were captured, deserted, killed in action, or subject to a more covert fate, their disappearance remains a story that has never been fully explained. The available evidence is fragmented, and the true fate of these men may never be known. It is a chilling reminder that in the chaos of war, vast numbers of lives can vanish without a trace, their stories buried beneath the rubble of history. The question remains, could there be a hidden truth still waiting to be uncovered? A truth that might shed light on the fate of these missing soldiers and perhaps reveal more about the final days of the war and the shadowy secrets that Nazi Germany desperately tried to conceal. Only time will tell if the missing soldiers of World War II will ever be accounted for, or if their fate will remain one of history's enduring mysteries. The sky over the Atlantic Ocean was calm on the afternoon of December 5, 1945. The airstrip at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale in Florida was bustling with activity as pilots readied their planes for a routine training mission. 5 Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, part of a squadron known as Flight 19, were scheduled to carry out a navigation and bombing exercise in the area. The planes, each carrying a crew of 3, were veteran aircraft, well tested and reliable. But what was supposed to be a routine training flight soon became one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of World War II, and perhaps the most infamous disappearance in aviation history. The pilots of Flight 19 were experienced, their training flawless. Led by Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, a seasoned officer with over 2,500 hours of flight time, the crew embarked on their mission. They would fly out over the ocean, carry out a series of bombing exercises, and then return to base. But something went terribly wrong, and that afternoon, Flight 19 vanished from the radar screens and from history, leaving no trace behind. Initial reports from the pilots indicated that they had become disoriented. According to their communications, they were unable to find the designated landmarks or the expected position for their bombing runs. Lieutenant Taylor, who was leading the squadron, became increasingly confused and stated that the flight was lost, even claiming that he could not identify the usual landmarks, despite the clear skies and visible horizon. Taylor, a man known for his exceptional skill and knowledge, should have been able to navigate the mission with ease. Yet, as the minutes turned to hours, Flight 19's radio transmissions grew more frantic, more panicked. In the final communication, Lieutenant Taylor informed the base that his squadron was running out of gas and would attempt to head west to find land. And then, silence. No more radio transmissions, no distress signals, no sign of the planes, just an eerie void. The search that followed would become an extensive and mysterious operation. Hundreds of planes, ships, and personnel scoured the skies and seas over a vast stretch of ocean, but no wreckage, no bodies, not even a faint trace of the planes could be found. The aircraft, carrying 20 men, simply disappeared without a trace. As the search effort continued for days, the mystery only deepened, with theories ranging from the plausible to the extraordinary. In the immediate aftermath of the disappearance, one of the more mundane explanations suggested a navigational error, perhaps compounded by equipment failure. Lieutenant Taylor, while a skilled aviator, might have miscalculated the flight's location, leading to a situation where he was unable to identify the correct heading. This would explain why the planes failed to return to base and why they would have run low on fuel. The fact that Flight 19 was flying over the ocean with no landmarks in sight could have contributed to the confusion and disorientation of the pilots. But the problem with this theory is that Taylor was not a rookie pilot. He had flown many long missions and was familiar with the terrain and the landmarks. Moreover, it would seem implausible for a man of his experience to make such a critical error, especially with clear weather and visual landmarks available. Some also pointed to the possibility of a malfunction in the planes themselves. Could a mechanical failure have led to a crash? After all, the TBF Avenger was a complex aircraft, and even a small issue could have led to catastrophic consequences. But again, there was no evidence of any malfunction, and the plane's disappearance seemed too complete, too absolute, to be explained by something as straightforward as an engine failure. The lack of wreckage and the absence of any debris or bodies made this explanation hard to believe. As the search continued, another theory began to emerge, that Flight 19 had somehow become lost in a strange, unexplainable way. Some suggested that the pilots were victims of the Bermuda Triangle, a region of the Atlantic Ocean infamous for unexplained disappearances. Over the years, the Bermuda Triangle has become a focal point for speculation and theories of all kinds. Some argue that unusual weather patterns, electromagnetic anomalies, or even unknown phenomena might cause navigational errors, disorientation, or even complete loss of contact. Could Flight 19 have encountered one of these inexplicable forces, leading to their mysterious vanishing? This theory is, of course, controversial. The Bermuda Triangle has long been surrounded by mystery, but most scientific explanations point to natural causes, such as sudden storms, magnetic fields, or currents, which could have played a role in disorienting the pilots. Still, the coincidence of the planes vanishing in the general area of the Bermuda Triangle, combined with their odd disappearance, has made the region an unavoidable factor in the speculation surrounding Flight 19. Another strange aspect of this story is the involvement of another aircraft in the search efforts. A PBM Mariner flying boat, sent to assist in the search for the missing planes, also disappeared. This was not simply a case of a plane vanishing on its own. This was a second aircraft, a full 13 minutes into the search, that radioed in a distress message, then also vanished. Could it be that something even stranger, something more sinister, was at play? Was there a secret military operation or an advanced technology, perhaps even something the U.S. military had developed during the war, that caused both Flight 19 and the PBM Mariner to disappear? Was this a case of something more extraordinary than simply a navigational error? Some fringe theories go even further, proposing that the flight was the victim of a military cover-up. Did Flight 19 somehow become involved in a secret mission that went awry? Did they stumble upon something, whether an enemy or a forbidden area, leading to their disappearance? While these theories remain speculative and unverified, they continue to captivate the imaginations of those who believe that there may have been a hidden agenda behind the mission's failure. Could the truth behind the disappearance of Flight 19 have been deliberately suppressed, buried under layers of secrecy? Even more curious are reports suggesting that pilots from later flights, flying similar missions, had eerie encounters over the same region. Some claim to have seen flashes of light, strange cloud formations, or even unexplained disturbances in their navigational instruments. While these reports are difficult to verify, they add to the growing sense that something unexplainable may have been at work in the skies that fateful day. The fate of Flight 19 remains one of the most enduring mysteries of World War II. The planes, the pilots, and the entire squadron seem to have vanished into history, leaving behind only unanswered questions. Could it have been a navigational mistake, a mechanical failure, or a freak accident? Or is there something far more mysterious and unexplainable that has kept the truth about Flight 19 hidden from us? Some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, their answers locked away forever in the depths of the ocean or the fog of time. What remains certain is that Flight 19, its brave crew, and their sudden disappearance continue to haunt our collective memory. The plane's final radio transmissions, their last desperate attempts to find land, echo across the decades, reminding us that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not the ones that are easily explained, but those that elude our grasp forever. In the final days of World War II, as the Allies closed in on the crumbling Third Reich, a mysterious convoy disappeared into the mountains of Poland, leaving behind only fragmented accounts, rumors, and theories. The story of the missing Nazi train is one of the most tantalizing and enduring mysteries of the war, one that has sparked curiosity, adventure, and a relentless search for the truth. Was it a simple train lost to time, or could it be the secret of a vast treasure hoard hidden away in the mountains, waiting to be uncovered? The legend began in 1945, as the war was nearing its end. The Soviet and Allied forces were advancing on Germany from both the east and west, and the Nazi regime, already teetering on the brink of collapse, began to scramble to hide its assets, artifacts, gold, and priceless treasures looted from across Europe. With the approaching end of the war, high-ranking Nazi officials feared not only the impending defeat, but also the loss of the fortune they had accumulated during their years of conquest. Amid this chaos, a mysterious train left the German city of Breslau, now Wrocław, Poland, bound for the remote mountain region of Lower Silesia in what is today southwestern Poland. This train, loaded with treasure, artifacts, and possibly even precious artworks, was meant to be hidden away in one of the many underground bunkers and caves that dotted the rugged terrain. The train was said to be part of a larger operation to conceal the Nazi wealth from the advancing Allied forces. However, the exact details of its journey remain shrouded in mystery. According to reports from surviving witnesses, the train simply vanished without a trace as it neared the area known as the Owl Mountains, where many of the Nazi secret projects were rumored to have been located. Some even claim the train was forced into an underground tunnel, never to be seen again. The disappearance of the Nazi treasure train has been the subject of intense speculation ever since. In the years following the war, rumors began to circulate that the train had been hidden somewhere in the rugged and dense mountain ranges, its vast cargo of treasure still waiting to be discovered. The story took on a life of its own, fueled by the idea of untold riches locked away for decades, hidden beneath layers of concrete, rock, and history. For years, this mystery was largely confined to the realm of legend, with few concrete details to support the claims. But then, in the 1990s, interest in the lost train was reignited. Polish archaeologists and treasure hunters, intrigued by the possibility of finding this hidden cache, began to search the area. In 2015, a breakthrough came when two German treasure hunters, Andreas Richter and Piotr Koper, claimed to have found the location of the lost train. They reported that using ground-penetrating radar, they had located a large object buried deep beneath the earth, not far from the town of Walbjik, near the Owl Mountains. Their announcement set off a new wave of interest and excitement as the world waited for more information. Despite the initial excitement, the discovery has not yielded the promised treasure. The object detected by the radar remains a mystery, with many experts questioning the validity of the find. The local authorities, skeptical of the treasure hunters' claims, have conducted their own searches, but no definitive evidence has been uncovered to confirm the existence of the Nazi train. So, what happened to the train, and why has it been so difficult to uncover? One plausible explanation suggests that the train never truly existed as a treasure-laden convoy. It is entirely possible that, in the chaos of the war's final days, the German military simply mislaid the train, or that it was repurposed to transport troops, weapons, or supplies to other locations. The train's disappearance could have been a result of confusion, a miscommunication, or even a simple logistical error. In a time when the Nazi regime was disintegrating and surrender loomed, many things were thrown into disarray. The train, in this view, might not have been some grand treasure convoy at all, but merely another casualty of the war's final confusion. However, the theories that suggest the train was indeed a treasure trove continue to persist, bolstered by tantalizing fragments of evidence. Some argue that the train was part of a larger operation to conceal Nazi assets in the event of defeat, a final act of preservation before the Allies could seize it. Lower Silesia, with its remote and mountainous terrain, provided the perfect cover for such a hidden operation. The area was already home to a network of underground bunkers, tunnels, and secret Nazi installations, which further fuels the speculation that the train could have been hidden in one of these complexes. These bunkers were used by the Nazis for everything from research into advanced weaponry to experiments that have long remained classified. One of the more intriguing aspects of this mystery is the involvement of the so-called Nazi gold. As the Allies advanced into Germany, reports of looted gold, artwork, and valuables began to surface. Some of this treasure, it is believed, may have been hidden on the train bound for the mountains, including vast quantities of gold bars, precious artwork stolen from Jewish families and museums, and even artifacts looted from conquered nations. The thought of this treasure, hidden for over 70 years, remains a powerful lure for those who continue to seek it out. Another theory posits that the train was loaded with items of immense political or military value, documents, prototypes, or weapons that the Nazis wished to preserve for a future, perhaps even in the hopes of re-establishing a Nazi regime. In the aftermath of the war, as Germany faced its defeat, any hope of such a regime seemed increasingly remote. But in the fevered minds of some Nazi leaders, the idea of preserving their secrets and assets for some future resurgence might have been a real concern. Then there's the ever-popular theory that suggests the treasure train could have been involved in an elaborate cover-up, designed to hide the truth about the Nazis' darkest operations. Was the train carrying something far more sinister than gold or art? Was it hiding the last remnants of Nazi weaponry, evidence of secret projects, or documents that could expose the full extent of the atrocities committed by the regime? The idea that the train's cargo might have been kept hidden to prevent further investigation into the darkest chapters of Nazi history adds an air of mystery to the story that continues to capture the public's imagination. Despite decades of searching, no one has yet uncovered the final resting place of the elusive Nazi train. Countless treasure hunters have combed the mountains, only to be left with nothing but empty tunnels and unexplained findings. Some remain convinced that the train is hidden in the region, waiting for someone with the right tools or luck to uncover it. Others believe the train may never be found, its secrets buried forever beneath the weight of history. As more and more expeditions are launched in search of the train, one question remains. What secrets lie buried in the mountains of Lower Silesia? Is it possible that a vast fortune, treasures, artifacts, and secrets, still lies hidden beneath the earth, waiting to be discovered? Or is the Nazi train a myth, an enduring legend woven into the fabric of the war's final days, offering hope and mystery to those who dare to seek its truth? The search continues, but for now, the missing Nazi train remains just that, a mystery lost to time. In the spring of 1944, as the Allied forces prepared for what would become one of the most significant and pivotal operations of World War II, the invasion of Normandy, something extraordinary was happening behind the scenes. While much of the world's attention was focused on the beaches of France, a covert operation, known as the Ghost Army, was working in the shadows, using deception, visual tricks, and elaborate ruses to mislead the enemy. The Ghost Army, composed of artists, designers, and sound engineers, was tasked with one simple yet ambitious goal: to convince the Nazis that the Allies were far more numerous and powerful than they actually were. At its core, the Ghost Army was an illusion, an elaborate series of visual, auditory, and tactical tricks designed to deceive the German military into misinterpreting the scale and location of Allied forces. This secret army was not made up of soldiers trained for combat, but rather a team of specialists who understood the power of perception. Their weapons were not rifles or tanks, but inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, and sound systems that mimicked the noise of battle. They operated under extreme secrecy, their missions often classified for decades, and their actions remain one of the most audacious and successful examples of psychological warfare in history. The story of the Ghost Army begins in 1942, when the Allies realized that they needed to mislead the Germans about their military intentions in Europe. The Allies knew that the Nazis were keenly aware of every move they made, and that even the slightest shift in military positioning could tip the balance of power. They needed a way to create the illusion of a much larger force, one capable of keeping the Germans off balance and unsure of where the real assault would come from. The solution was simple, yet brilliant: deception. Led by a group of experts in psychology and art, the Ghost Army was assembled, and its members included artists, illustrators, and set designers, people who had spent their careers creating illusions for the theater and advertising. These individuals were tasked with creating the most convincing fake armies imaginable. Their work would consist of everything from inflatable tanks to massive fake artillery pieces, all designed to make the Germans believe that the Allies had far more resources and troops than they actually did. One of the most impressive tools used by the Ghost Army was the inflatable tank. These massive rubber replicas of Sherman tanks were incredibly realistic, even from a distance. When deployed in vast numbers, the tanks appeared to be a real armored division. The Ghost Army would use trucks to move the inflatables around at night, creating the illusion of constant movement and redeployment. The Germans, unable to distinguish between real and fake tanks, would often waste valuable resources and manpower preparing for a non-existent attack. But the visual tricks didn't stop with tanks. The Ghost Army also used sound equipment to simulate the noise of heavy artillery fire, the rumble of trucks, and the sound of troops marching. By carefully positioning loudspeakers and playing recorded noises at specific times, they were able to make it seem as though entire divisions were on the move, even when no such troops existed. The sound equipment was so effective that it was often difficult for even the most seasoned soldiers to tell the difference between a real army and the ghostly one that existed only in the minds of the German forces. Another key part of the Ghost Army's strategy was the use of fake radio transmissions. The Allies understood that the Nazis were highly attuned to radio communications, and so they flooded the airwaves with false signals, pretending to be different units in different locations. These radio broadcasts helped create the illusion of a vast, sprawling force stretching across the European theater, when in reality, the Ghost Army was nothing more than a few hundred men scattered across France. Perhaps one of the most remarkable aspects of the Ghost Army was its ability to stay hidden in plain sight. The soldiers involved in the operation were trained to work in complete secrecy, and they used their knowledge of the media and the arts to create the most convincing deception possible. Their work was so effective that it often took weeks, sometimes months, for the Germans to realize that they had been duped. The Ghost Army's most famous mission came in the lead-up to the D-Day invasion in 1944. The Allies wanted to make the Germans believe that the invasion would take place in the Pas-de-Calais region of France, rather than in Normandy. To accomplish this, they used all of their resources to create the illusion of a massive buildup of forces in the Pas-de-Calais area. They inflated hundreds of fake tanks, set up fake airfields, and even used sound equipment to simulate the sounds of military activity. The Germans, unable to discern between the real and the fake, focused their attention on the wrong location, leaving Normandy relatively undefended when the real invasion came. The success of the Ghost Army is one of the most striking examples of how psychological warfare can shift the tide of battle. By fooling the enemy into thinking they were facing a far larger force than they actually were, the Allies were able to maintain the element of surprise, a crucial factor in the success of D-Day. Without the distraction caused by the Ghost Army, the Germans may have been able to bolster their defenses in Normandy, potentially altering the outcome of the invasion. However, the true extent of the Ghost Army's impact remains unclear. Despite its successes, much of what the Ghost Army did remains classified, and many of the details of its operations are still shrouded in secrecy. How many times did the Ghost Army fool the Germans? How many other operations were they involved in? And perhaps most intriguingly, how much did the Nazis actually know about the deception? And were they ever able to uncover the full scale of the Allies' ruses? The secrecy surrounding the Ghost Army persisted for decades, with most of the soldiers involved in the operation forbidden from speaking about their missions until long after the war had ended. In fact, it wasn't until the 1990s that the true extent of the Ghost Army's operations came to light, when the U.S. government declassified many of the documents related to the operation. Yet even today, there are still unanswered questions. How many more successful deceptions were carried out by the Ghost Army? Were there other operations that remain classified? And perhaps most perplexingly, why did the Nazis never seem to catch on to the scale of the deception, despite the Allies' frequent use of these tricks? Some have speculated that the Nazis might have been so focused on the threat posed by the Allies' conventional forces that they simply didn't consider the possibility of such elaborate deceptions. Others argue that the Nazis may have suspected the truth but chose not to act on it, perhaps because they couldn't risk the possibility of being wrong. Regardless of the reasons, the fact remains that the Ghost Army's work was instrumental in the success of the Allied campaign in Europe. Their use of deception, whether through inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, or carefully timed sound effects, demonstrated the power of illusion in warfare. The Ghost Army's story is a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of the men and women who participated in the operation, and it serves as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon in war is not the gun or the bomb, but the ability to deceive. As we look back on the operations of the Ghost Army, one question remains: how much of history is shaped not by the victories we can see, but by the ones we can't? The Ghost Army was an invisible force, shaping the outcome of one of the most significant events in history without ever being seen by the world at large. Their legacy lives on not only in the success of D-Day, but in the countless lessons they impart about the nature of warfare, deception, and the human capacity for ingenuity in times of crisis. In the final years of World War II, as the conflict reached a fever pitch, the Nazi regime was said to be working on a series of technological marvels that could alter the course of history. Amidst the chaos of war, rumors spread of advanced weaponry, mysterious research projects, and machines that defied conventional understanding. Many of these technologies, cloaked in secrecy, were supposedly capable of changing the balance of power, not just on the battlefield, but in the very fabric of global politics and technology. From the cold, imposing factories deep in the heart of Germany, scientists and engineers labored tirelessly on what they believed would be the next generation of warfare. But were these weapons truly as groundbreaking as legend suggests? Or were they nothing more than the delusions of a regime in its final throes, desperate for a miracle? One of the most frequently cited examples of Nazi technological ambition is the so-called Wunderwaffe, the wonder weapons that were supposed to bring victory to Hitler's failing war machine. These weapons, some of which were partially realized in the form of rockets, jet aircraft, and advanced artillery, promised to revolutionize warfare. Yet, despite their innovation, they arrived too late and were often underdeveloped or impractical. But the question remains, could there have been even more secretive projects, hidden from the world, that were truly capable of reshaping the world as we know it? The rocket and the jet, the first glimpses of tomorrow's technology. Among the most famous of these Wunderwaffe were the V2 rockets, developed by the German engineer Wernher von Braun. These early ballistic missiles represented a radical leap in weaponry, designed to deliver death at unprecedented speeds and distances. The V2, propelled by rocket engines, could travel at supersonic speeds, reaching targets as far as London from launch sites in Europe. The sheer power and potential of these rockets sparked the imaginations of military strategists and scientists alike. Even more remarkable, however, was the development of jet aircraft, such as the Messerschmitt Me-262. The world's first operational jet fighter, the Me-262 was faster and more maneuverable than anything the Allies had in the skies. It was capable of reaching speeds over 540 miles per hour, making it a formidable adversary. Yet, like the V2 rockets, the Me-262 was deployed too late in the war to make a decisive impact. Its technological advancements, however, would lay the foundation for the future of aviation. But the question remains, were these technologies the pinnacle of Nazi innovation, or were they merely the first steps towards something far more dangerous and revolutionary? The rise of the miracle machines. Beyond the rockets and jets, there were whispers of even more fantastical creations, devices that seemed to stretch the boundaries of science and engineering. In the late stages of the war, rumors began to surface of experiments that could potentially change the world. Some reports suggest the Nazis were working on a form of nuclear technology, an atomic bomb capable of altering the course of history. But unlike the U.S. Manhattan Project, which achieved success in 1945, the German effort to harness atomic energy was not as advanced, and questions remain about how close they really came to developing such a weapon. Even more intriguing were reports of strange devices and unconventional projects that have become the stuff of legend. Stories circulated of a bell-shaped machine, referred to as the Die Glocke, a device that allegedly had the ability to manipulate gravity, time, and space. The Die Glocke has been described as a top-secret project, surrounded by mystery, conducted in a remote facility in Lower Silesia. Some theories suggest that it may have been an early attempt at anti-gravity technology, while others speculate it could have been part of an effort to develop weapons based on unknown physical principles. Eyewitness accounts from those who were involved in the project remain sparse and often contradictory. The few who claim to have seen the Die Glocke describe it as an otherworldly device, shiny, metallic, and surrounded by an eerie other-dimensional energy. But did this bell really exist, or was it simply a myth propagated by rumors and fear during the war? The Hootenanny and the Lost Files Beyond Die Glocke, some researchers point to other tantalizing hints of Nazi technological experimentation. One theory suggests that the Nazis were working on highly advanced radar systems, capable of detecting enemy planes at great distances, rendering traditional defenses obsolete. Others claim the Germans were working on advanced chemical or biological weapons, more powerful than any previously seen. Still, the most bizarre theories suggest the Nazis were investigating the possibility of time travel, teleportation, or even weapons capable of altering human consciousness. The problem, however, is that most of these theories are based on little more than scraps of evidence. Documents were lost or destroyed in the final days of the war, leaving behind only fragmented clues as to the true nature of these projects. What happened to the scientific community that backed these initiatives? Were the results of their work suppressed or hidden away by those who understood the gravity of such discoveries? And if so, why has much of the evidence been buried? Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of these theories is the role of the Vril Society, a group of mystical scientists and occultists rumored to have been involved in the development of Nazi technology. According to certain fringe accounts, this group believed in the existence of a hidden, almost supernatural energy force, one that could be harnessed to create miraculous technologies. The connection between this mystical belief system and the advanced weaponry and devices the Nazis allegedly developed is unclear, but the idea of Vril has persisted in conspiratorial circles, often connected with tales of flying saucers and strange devices. What's left in the shadows? Despite the many attempts to uncover the full extent of Nazi technological efforts, much of the information remains hidden. Some of the more speculative theories, ranging from flying saucers to time machines, may sound fantastical, but they persist in the annals of WW2 conspiracy lore. What can be said with certainty, however, is that the Nazis were indeed on the cusp of a technological revolution. Whether they had weapons capable of changing the world, or merely a series of incomplete ideas, remains one of the great unanswered questions of the war. As the war came to a close, the Allied powers moved swiftly to secure Nazi scientists, and many were brought to the United States under the Operation Paperclip program to continue their work. These scientists were key to the development of post-war American technology, particularly in the fields of rocket science and aeronautics. Could it be that the full scope of what the Nazis were developing was simply appropriated rather than destroyed or hidden? As we ponder the legacy of Nazi secret technology, one thing is certain: the answers remain elusive. Were the rumors of advanced weapons and strange devices true, or are they nothing more than the fantasies of a regime desperate to hold onto its power? And if the Nazis did create something that could have changed the world, where is it now? The question lingers in the air like the fading smoke of a long extinguished fire. Did the Nazis really have the weapons that could have rewritten history, or did they just flirt with the edge of possibility? Only time and the slow uncovering of lost documents and forgotten testimonies will tell. In the early morning hours of February 25, 1942, the city of Los Angeles found itself in a state of near panic. The United States was only a few months removed from the attack on Pearl Harbor, and the fear of further strikes on the West Coast was palpable. With the specter of war hanging over the country, the atmosphere was ripe for tension. And that night, as the city's skyline loomed under the cloak of darkness, an event unfolded that would stir both curiosity and skepticism for decades to come. At around 3 a.m., radar operators at a coastal defense station detected an unknown object off the coast of California. What followed next would become one of the most perplexing and debated incidents of World War II. A barrage of anti-aircraft fire lighting up the sky as searchlights were trained on a mysterious object hovering over the city. For over an hour, Los Angeles was under attack. At least, that's how it seemed. Thousands of rounds were fired into the night sky, but the object, whatever it was, remained eerily unaffected. continuing its silent and deliberate course. This bizarre episode, which came to be known as the Battle of Los Angeles, has since become the subject of intense speculation. The official explanation at the time was that the city had fallen victim to a false alarm. With the nation on high alert, the military assumed it was a case of war nerves and overzealous defense. But for many, that explanation was far too simple. What was the object exactly? Why did the anti-aircraft guns fail to hit it? And perhaps most curiously, what did it want? Or was it simply observing? It was the sight of Los Angeles in chaos that stuck in the minds of those who lived through the event. The city's streets were soon flooded with people pouring into the open, looking up at the sky, where huge searchlights swept through the foggy night. Anti-aircraft guns fired incessantly, tracing arcs of light and smoke as they aimed at the object. Incredibly, none of the shells seemed to make contact. Witnesses described the object as being of varying sizes, with some reporting a large round shape, while others spoke of it as having a triangular or even cylindrical form. As the object hovered above the city for about an hour, reports from multiple military and civilian sources differed. Some claimed the object was stationary, others believed it was moving slowly over the city. The chaos was compounded by the fact that the object was entirely unaffected by the barrage of fire aimed at it. No explosions, no damage, just a silent, enigmatic presence. When the event finally came to a close, the city was left with an eerie silence. No plane had been shot down. No evidence of an enemy attack was found. The official conclusion from the U.S. Army was that the entire incident was a result of mass hysteria. Military personnel suggested that the object had been nothing more than a weather balloon, or perhaps a combination of flares and cloud cover, which had been misinterpreted by the air defense crews. But was that truly the case? In the years since the Battle of Los Angeles, a more speculative theory has emerged, one that suggests the object in question was not a weather balloon, nor was it simply a figment of a nervous public's imagination. Could it have been a UFO? The timing of the incident, shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor and in the midst of a global war, seems to add a strange layer of intrigue. Many believe that the object may have been a reconnaissance vehicle from another world, observing human conflict from above, while others suggest it was the beginning of extraterrestrial interest in Earth's wartime affairs. But there's more to the story. The military's official stance, as well as the fact that no plane was downed or even damaged during the attack, raises some interesting questions. UFO enthusiasts point to the possibility that the object was not just a simple weather anomaly, but rather something far more technologically advanced. Why, after all, did this object appear to withstand direct hits from anti-aircraft fire without so much as a scratch? Was it a test by an advanced military force, perhaps another nation experimenting with cutting-edge technology? Additionally, several eyewitnesses, many of them trained military personnel, reported that the object didn't behave like any known aircraft. The military, for its part, made little effort to explain why so many rounds of artillery were fired at an object that, in the end, simply vanished. It seems that the official narrative never fully answered the questions left behind by this strange and unresolved episode. As with many unexplained events in history, the mystery of the Battle of Los Angeles has sparked a variety of theories. Some theorists argue that the object was part of a broader pattern of sightings that began during the early years of World War II, suggesting that UFOs, or extraterrestrial visitors, may have had a direct interest in the course of human history during the war. The theory of flying saucers, or UFOs, being a part of wartime activities is one that many researchers have examined, and many UFO enthusiasts believe the sightings of the 1940s and 1950s were tied to early encounters with unknown technologies. While there are other explanations that have been offered, ranging from the idea that it was a Japanese aircraft or some sort of experimental military craft, The UFO theory remains one of the most popular and tantalizing. Could it be that something otherworldly was quietly observing humanity's violent struggle from above, studying our technology, our behavior, or even attempting to intervene in our global conflict? Perhaps even more perplexing is the possibility that the object was not a solitary instance, but part of a larger, ongoing series of observations. Given the escalating sightings and reports of unidentified flying objects during and after World War II, one could wonder, was the Battle of Los Angeles just the beginning of something greater? Could these UFOs have been involved in gathering intelligence or even conducting their own form of covert operations? Despite decades of research, we may never know the true nature of the object over Los Angeles on that fateful night. The explanations offered, whether it was a weather balloon, an enemy plane, or mass hysteria, never seemed to fully address the mystery of the attack itself. The object was not just a shadow in the sky. It was an enigma that defied the capabilities of the military's defenses. The true significance of the Battle of Los Angeles might lie not in the answers we have, but in the questions that persist. Was this a case of mass hysteria? Or was something far more extraordinary occurring that night? Was the object a foreign aircraft? Or was it something beyond our understanding, observing humanity at a moment of great tension? As with many wartime mysteries, the answers may never be fully known. But as new information comes to light, as new declassified documents emerge, and as theories continue to evolve, one thing remains clear. The Battle of Los Angeles is far from just a strange historical footnote. It is a moment that continues to provoke wonder and uncertainty, offering an open invitation for further exploration into the unknown. And, as we look back on that mysterious night in February 1942, we are left to wonder, what might still be waiting to be uncovered? In the summer of 1947, a strange incident unfolded in the remote desert town of Roswell, New Mexico, that would spark one of the most enduring mysteries in modern history. The story began with a rancher discovering strange debris scattered across a vast stretch of land, a debris field that was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Military personnel soon arrived, cordoning off the area and taking control of the situation. Officially, the government claimed it was a weather balloon that had crashed. However, as the years passed, the Roswell incident grew into a phenomenon far more complex, sparking countless theories, books, documentaries, and debates about what truly happened that day. But what if the incident was not just a random, isolated event? What if, in some way, it was connected to the turbulent, secretive world of World War II? The timing of the Roswell crash is particularly intriguing. It occurred just 2 years after the end of the war and amid an increasing atmosphere of Cold War tension and military secrecy. At the time, the world was still reeling from the shocking revelations of the devastation wrought by the conflict, and global power structures were shifting rapidly. Could the secrets of the war, especially the advanced technologies and scientific breakthroughs developed by the Nazis, have played a role in the events that led to the mysterious crash near Roswell? Many historians and UFO researchers suggest that the Roswell incident may have been more closely linked to the aftermath of World War II than previously thought. Throughout the war, Nazi Germany had been engaged in a frantic race to develop new, advanced technologies. Their research in fields such as rocketry, radar, and aviation led to some groundbreaking discoveries, many of which have only become fully understood in the decades since. Among the most unsettling theories surrounding the Nazis' technological advancements is the belief that they had been exploring the possibility of extraterrestrial contact. Some claim that the Nazis had uncovered evidence of advanced technology far beyond their own capabilities, potentially even interacting with otherworldly forces. Could it be that they stumbled upon something that the Allies, after defeating the Nazis, continued to investigate in secrecy? In the years following World War II, the United States embarked on a series of classified operations to seize Nazi scientific knowledge. This period, known as Operation Paperclip, saw many of Germany's top scientists, some of whom had worked on rocket technology, jet propulsion, and even early forms of radar and electromagnetic research, brought to the U.S. to assist with the American military's own technological development. It is well documented that the Nazis were conducting advanced experiments in a number of cutting-edge fields. Was it possible that they had made contact with beings from another world, or discovered technology that was not of this earth? One of the most controversial theories surrounding the Roswell incident is that the crashed object in New Mexico was not a weather balloon, as the military initially claimed, but a secret military craft, possibly a Nazi prototype that had somehow made its way to the U.S. after the war. Some researchers have pointed to the Nazi interest in flying saucers or circular aircraft, which, although never fully realized during the war, were the subject of much speculation and research. Could the object found in Roswell have been a piece of experimental technology that the U.S. military was not yet prepared to reveal to the public? Furthermore, there are those who believe that the Nazis' secretive research into advanced propulsion systems, some of which were theorized to have anti-gravity capabilities, might have inadvertently led to the crash near Roswell. The concept of anti-gravity technology, a device capable of manipulating gravitational forces to enable flight, was one of the most elusive goals of the Nazis' late-war scientific endeavors. Some speculate that the Nazis had managed to develop rudimentary forms of this technology before the war ended, and that this knowledge, passed on to American scientists after the war, could explain the strange and seemingly impossible movements of the object that crashed in Roswell. Another fascinating connection comes from the possibility that the Roswell crash was linked to the numerous UFO sightings that proliferated in the post-war years. UFO enthusiasts have long pointed out that the frequency of flying saucer sightings seemed to increase sharply after World War II, coinciding with the rise of Cold War tensions and the top-secret research programs that followed the war's end. Some argue that the Roswell incident could have been part of a broader pattern of extraterrestrial sightings and encounters, possibly linked to the activities of wartime scientists, their interest in exotic technologies, and even covert experimentation with alien-like propulsion systems. The post-war period also saw the rise of heightened military activity as the United States and the Soviet Union competed for dominance on the world stage. The development of nuclear weapons, jet propulsion, and the beginning of the space race would lead to rapid advancements in technology. But could these advancements have been influenced by something other than human ingenuity? Were the strange objects seen in the skies over Roswell and elsewhere during this time the result of secret Nazi projects that were continued under the auspices of the U.S. government? Or could they have been something more mysterious? While many official accounts have concluded that the Roswell crash was simply the result of a military weather balloon, a small group of dedicated researchers have consistently questioned this narrative, proposing instead that the true story involves a much more elaborate cover-up. They suggest that the debris recovered from the crash was not of this Earth, and that the U.S. government, in an effort to safeguard national security and avoid public panic, concealed the discovery of extraterrestrial technology for decades. What then was the true origin of the object found in Roswell? Was it connected to Nazi experiments, or was it part of something far more extraordinary, perhaps even beyond human comprehension? As we peel back the layers of history surrounding the Roswell incident, the connections to World War II only deepen the intrigue. The Nazis' pursuit of advanced technology, their strange and secretive experiments, and the sudden influx of foreign scientific expertise into the U.S. after the war all point toward a possible link between the events of the war and the crash in the New Mexico desert. Was the Roswell incident a product of wartime experiments gone awry, or was it a symptom of something far larger, something that continues to elude us even today. While we may never have definitive answers, one thing remains clear. The Roswell incident, with its tantalizing hints of hidden technology, secretive military operations, and possibly extraterrestrial involvement, remains one of the most captivating and unresolved mysteries in the history of the 20th century. As the lines between fact and fiction blur, the connections to WW2 grow even more intriguing. And as we continue to uncover new details about that fateful summer of 1947, we are left to wonder, what secrets remain buried in the sands of Roswell, and what truths might still be waiting to be revealed? As World War II came to a close, the landscape of global power and knowledge was irrevocably altered. While the Allied forces celebrated victory over Nazi Germany, there was an undercurrent of tension, secrecy, and, some would argue, opportunity. In the aftermath of the war, the United States and the Soviet Union became locked in a fierce race to seize not only territory but also scientific advancements. Among the most sought-after prizes were the minds of Germany's top scientists, many of whom had worked on projects so secretive and advanced that they were beyond the comprehension of most at the time. These scientists, rather than being punished for their allegiance to the Nazi regime, were brought to the U.S. under a covert program known as Operation Paperclip. But what is less often discussed are the secrets these scientists may have left behind. Plans, documents, and perhaps even aspirations that suggest their ties to the U.S. were not as simple as they appeared. The Operation Paperclip program, established by the U.S. government in 1945, was designed to bring German scientists and engineers, many of whom had worked on advanced military technologies, into American service. Over 1,600 individuals, including some of the most brilliant minds of the Nazi era, were quietly smuggled into the United States under the guise of peace and progress. Their expertise would play a pivotal role in advancing American military technology during the Cold War. These scientists, engineers, and technicians were tasked with developing everything from jet propulsion and rocket technology to chemical warfare agents and early computer systems. However, the true scope of their influence and the possible motives behind their recruitment remains a matter of intrigue. One of the more curious aspects of this program is the possibility that these German scientists had far more ambitious plans than simply aiding the U.S. government in the post-war era. Many historians speculate that, given the severe conditions in Europe following the war's conclusion, some of these scientists had more to gain by staying in the U.S. permanently. This raises the question, did they have designs beyond simply sharing their expertise in return for a safe haven? Did they have plans to secure their futures in the United States and perhaps even further their own research or political agendas? Could some have intended to use the opportunity provided by the Americans to carry out a covert agenda, one that might have linked them to a broader vision, either for themselves or for Germany's post-war legacy? For many of these scientists, the shift from working under the auspices of the Nazi regime to collaborating with their former enemies in the U.S. presented an odd and unsettling dilemma. Some had deep, unwavering loyalties to their homeland. But after the devastation of Germany in 1945, with cities reduced to rubble and the country divided, the promise of a new life in America must have been tempting. It's important to note that not all of the scientists brought over were entirely free of Nazi affiliations. Some had been members of the SS or the Nazi Party itself. Yet, their scientific expertise was so valuable that the U.S. government seemed willing to overlook, or at least suppress, their former affiliations. Was it possible that some of these scientists, with their expertise and political connections, harbored secret plans of their own to influence the future of American science, politics, or even global geopolitics? One of the most prominent figures among these scientists was Wernher von Braun, a key figure in the development of the German V2 rocket and later the U.S. space program. Von Braun's work would lay the foundation for America's missile and space exploration programs, but it's his involvement with the Nazi regime that has raised many questions. During the war, he was not only a member of the Nazi Party, but also had a direct role in the use of forced labor to build the V-2 rockets. Despite his scientific brilliance, von Braun's past remained a point of controversy. What then motivated him and others like him to migrate to the U.S.? Was it purely a matter of scientific pursuit, or did it reflect a deeper desire to be part of a new global order? While some scientists, like von Braun, were in the public eye and actively contributing to American projects, others worked more discreetly, their contributions not as immediately apparent. Some may have remained involved in classified research, contributing to the development of new technologies that were of profound importance but kept hidden from the public. The U.S. military, with its vast resources and unquenchable thirst for technological superiority, surely benefited from this influx of German talent. But did they have an agenda of their own? Was the recruitment of Nazi scientists part of a larger, more insidious plan? One that may have extended far beyond the confines of simple scientific advancement? The mystery of these German scientists' post-war activities deepens when we consider their potential motivations beyond the purely scientific. Were some of them simply trying to make amends for their roles during the war? Or did they hope to regain the lost power and influence of the Nazi regime? After all, many of these scientists were not merely involved in rocket development and engineering. They were at the forefront of secret Nazi research into fields such as advanced aircraft, energy weapons, mind control, and even anti-gravity technologies. The Allies had won the war, but had the Nazis won in other ways? Had they managed to keep their most precious secrets hidden? And did they intend to continue their research in the United States, perhaps outside the purview of U.S. government oversight? One of the more tantalizing possibilities is the existence of secret documents and plans, either held by the U.S. government or by the scientists themselves, that have never been fully revealed. Could there have been contingency plans for a Fourth Reich? Were there secret organizations formed within the United States during the Cold War that sought to advance Nazi ideals, using the knowledge gained during the war and facilitated by these scientists? These are the lingering questions that continue to stir imaginations. As we probe deeper into the lives of these scientists and their work, the unanswered questions only multiply. What secrets did they leave behind when they passed away? Their influence on American and global technologies fading into the annals of history. How many discoveries were made in the decades after the war that can be traced directly to the contributions of these scientists? And most importantly, did some of them, perhaps unknowingly, pave the way for even greater mysteries that would unravel decades later? The mystery surrounding these scientists and their post-war lives is not simply a question of historical curiosity. It raises important questions about the ethics of scientific pursuit, the intersection of knowledge and power, and the ways in which history can be shaped by the unseen hands of individuals operating in the shadows. The full scope of their intentions, whether for personal gain, the advancement of science, or perhaps something more, remains a mystery yet to be fully uncovered. What truths, if any, remain hidden in the archives of history? Only time and careful investigation may one day reveal the answers. As the war raged on, the Nazi U-boat fleet became one of the most feared weapons of World War II. These sleek, silent predators prowled the oceans, cutting off supply lines, sinking merchant ships, and disrupting the Allied forces with a deadly efficiency. The German Navy, or Kriegsmarine, had developed some of the most advanced submarines of the era, U-boats that were fast, stealthy, and capable of delivering devastating blows. Yet despite the heavy losses the Allies inflicted on the U-boat fleet, there are still lingering mysteries surrounding several of these submarines, some of which are believed to have never been found. In the chaotic final days of the war, as the Nazi regime collapsed and German forces scrambled to evade the advancing Allies, a significant number of U-boats mysteriously vanished. Some simply disappeared without a trace, their fates unknown. Others were believed to have been scuttled or sunk, but the precise locations of these wrecks remain a mystery to this day. Were these U-boats destroyed, or did they manage to escape and disappear into the shadows of history? One of the most intriguing theories revolves around the idea that some of these U-boats carried precious cargo, valuable materials, hidden weapons, and even high-ranking officers on secret missions in the closing months of the war. It's believed that certain U-boats, instead of surrendering to the Allies, embarked on a series of clandestine voyages that have left only whispers behind. These submarines and the secrets they might have carried have given rise to countless rumors and speculation. In the immediate aftermath of the war, as Nazi officials were captured and interrogated, some hinted at these secret missions. According to some accounts, a number of U-boats were tasked with transporting Nazi war criminals, high-ranking scientists, and even gold to distant shores. The possibility that some of these vessels reached their destination without ever being intercepted, or that their wrecks are still hidden deep beneath the ocean, has sparked intrigue among historians and treasure hunters alike. One of the most famous cases involves U-530, a Type 1C U-boat that surfaced in Argentina in July 1945, long after the end of the war. The submarine's crew claimed to have been on a secret mission, and there are theories that suggest it may have been carrying high-ranking Nazi officials trying to escape Europe and find refuge in South America. But did this U-boat truly fulfill its mission? And what other U-boats might have followed similar routes, disappearing into the vast expanse of the Atlantic or the waters off the coast of South America? The disappearance of these submarines has been a persistent puzzle. Some researchers believe that many of the lost U-boats were sunk during the final weeks of the war, as the Allies intensified their naval campaigns and closed in on German strongholds. Yet, despite decades of searching, many of these wrecks remain elusive. The harsh conditions of the deep ocean, the vast areas where these U-boats could have gone down, and the uncertainty surrounding the exact locations of their final missions make it exceedingly difficult to confirm their fates. In recent years, advances in technology have provided new opportunities to search for these lost submarines. Modern sonar systems and deep-sea exploration tools have allowed researchers to map vast areas of the ocean floor with unprecedented accuracy. Yet, even with these advancements, the ocean's depths still hold their secrets. For every U-boat that has been discovered, many more remain lost to time, resting in the cold, dark waters of the Atlantic or the Mediterranean. One of the most persistent rumors involves the so-called Nazi gold trains, a myth that has captured the imagination of many. According to the story, some U-boats were tasked with transporting stolen treasures, including gold, artwork, and other valuable items, to hidden locations, where they would remain safely out of Allied reach. Some claim that the U-boats may have sunk with their precious cargo, their contents never to be recovered. These stories, although largely speculative, have prompted expeditions to search the waters off the coasts of Europe and South America. Could there be sunken U-boats holding treasure that has yet to be found? Or are these merely myths that have grown in the telling? Beyond the treasure hunters and the theorists, there are also those who argue that these U-boats might have been involved in more sinister, covert activities. Could they have been carrying experimental weapons or materials tied to the Nazi regime's secret research programs? Some historians suggest that the Nazis were working on advanced technologies, including rocket systems, new propulsion methods, and even biological or chemical weapons. Could some of these U-boats have been transporting these deadly secrets across the seas, destined for locations where they would remain hidden for decades, long after the war ended? Adding to the intrigue are the peculiar patterns of disappearance and the occasional sightings or reports from sailors and fishermen who claim to have seen unusual vessels or strange phenomena at sea. These accounts, while often vague and unverified, fuel the mystery surrounding the fate of the U-boats. Could some of these sightings be linked to the lost submarines, still operational and undetected in the waters, their missions remaining a mystery to this day? While much of the speculation surrounding these lost U-boats remains unproven, it raises important questions about what we may have yet to uncover. What happened to these vessels in the final days of the war? Were they simply sunk, or did they embark on secret missions, carrying with them the last remnants of the Nazi regime's power and influence? Could they be lying in wait, deep beneath the waves, hiding their secrets from the world? As historians continue to investigate the fate of the lost Nazi U-boats, the question remains: what truths still lie hidden beneath the surface of the ocean? What mysteries from the depths of the sea are waiting to be discovered? As the world watched the horrors of World War II unfold, the shadow of secrecy loomed over the actions of the Nazi regime. Amid the chaos of war, Nazi scientists and engineers were developing technologies that, by all accounts, seemed far beyond their time. One such enigma is the so-called Die Glocke, the Nazi bell. Described as a strange, bell-shaped object that emitted a mysterious, low-frequency hum, it is said to have been the focal point of some of the most extraordinary scientific experiments of the war. But what exactly was Die Glocke? Was it a secret weapon, a time machine, or perhaps something even more inexplicable? The first whispers about the bell began to emerge after the war, from those who had been involved in the secret projects within Nazi Germany. Allegedly, Die Glocke was housed in a secluded underground facility in Poland, a place known as Der Riese, the Giant. The site itself was shrouded in mystery, with its true purpose never fully disclosed. According to some accounts, this bell-like device was part of a broader series of secret Nazi research projects under the direction of top scientists. The most famous name linked to these experiments is that of SS General Hans Kammler, a high-ranking officer who was in charge of many advanced weapons and technology initiatives, including the development of the V-2 rockets. The descriptions of Die Glocke are almost as mysterious as the device itself. Eyewitnesses reported that it was made of a shiny metallic material, resembling a large bell, with a base that appeared to be suspended on a set of platforms or pillars. Inside, it contained strange, unknown substances, sometimes said to be a glowing violet liquid. The device allegedly produced a hum or vibration that could be felt from a distance, even without direct contact. No one is sure what these vibrations were intended to do, but some suggest they could have been linked to gravity manipulation or time alteration. As the war drew to a close, the device and its research seemingly vanished. Some believe the bell was taken by the advancing Soviet forces, who were notorious for seizing German scientific advancements in their scramble to gather intelligence. Others believe it was moved or hidden before the Allies could seize it. The fate of Die Glocke remains uncertain, but its legacy has taken on a life of its own, fueling a growing fascination with Nazi secret technology. The mystery deepens when considering the reports from those who claim to have seen the bell in action. Some former scientists, including those who worked at the infamous Nazi research center in Peenemünde, suggested that the bell had the potential to affect time and space. Could the device have been part of an attempt to harness the forces of nature in ways that were not yet understood? Some theorists even suggest that the bell was designed for experiments with time travel or interdimensional travel, drawing on concepts that would not be developed for decades. Was this the true nature of Nazi secret research? The creation of a technology that could transcend the known laws of physics? Others contend that the bell was a highly advanced energy weapon, possibly intended to be used against the Allies in some capacity. If this were the case, it would fit the pattern of many Nazi weapons projects, where high-risk, high-reward technologies were developed in the hope of gaining an upper hand in the war. This idea is supported by some accounts that suggest Die Glocke was linked to the development of the Wunderwaffen, or wonder weapons, advanced technological devices that the Nazis believed could turn the tide of the war. Could the bell have been a weapon of mass destruction, capable of altering gravity or manipulating matter itself? There is also the question of the connection between Die Glocke and other strange Nazi experiments during the war. Some have linked it to the infamous Nazi UFOs, or Die Unidentified Flugscheiben, flying discs. These mysterious saucer-like craft were said to have been part of a secret Nazi program aimed at developing advanced aircraft capable of reaching extreme speeds and altitudes. Could Die Glocke have been a prototype or component of this program? Was it somehow tied to the UFO phenomenon that would later be investigated by military and government agencies around the world? Could the bell have played a role in the development of technology that was far ahead of its time? Technology that, if perfected, could have changed the course of history? One of the most fascinating theories surrounding Die Glocke is the possibility that it was a part of a broader, more mystical research project. Nazi scientists, particularly those linked to the SS, were obsessed with the occult and ancient esoteric knowledge. Some believe that Die Glocke may have been connected to occult practices or even supernatural beliefs. Was it an attempt to tap into some kind of hidden cosmic force? Perhaps even attempting to unlock the secrets of the universe itself? In the feverish, all-consuming desperation of the Nazi regime, it's possible that the boundaries between science, the supernatural, and mysticism became dangerously blurred. In the years following the war, rumors began to swirl about the bell's secretive nature and the strange deaths and disappearances of the scientists who worked on it. Some claimed that those involved in the Bell project suffered from unexplained illnesses or mental instability, with reports of unusual physical ailments or even death after contact with the device. Was Die Glocke a cursed object, as some have suggested? Was it somehow linked to a string of eerie occurrences that befell those who dared to engage with it? To this day, the true nature of Die Glocke remains a tantalizing enigma. Researchers, conspiracy theorists, and enthusiasts alike continue to investigate, trying to uncover clues that might explain its purpose. Some believe that it was merely a prototype for something much larger, something that would be refined in the years after the war. Others argue that it was far more than a mere weapon or experiment. It was a glimpse into a realm of science and technology that we are only now beginning to understand. The legacy of Die Glocke serves as a haunting reminder of the depths of scientific ambition and the dangerous paths that can be pursued in the name of war. Whether the bell was an early experiment in time manipulation, a gravity-defying weapon, or something even more mysterious, its existence continues to captivate the imagination. And perhaps, as the search for answers continues, we are left to wonder, what other secrets from the past have been lost to the sands of time, waiting to be uncovered? For now, the mystery of Die Glocke endures, and its secrets remain hidden, buried in the shadows of history. As the war raged across Europe, one of the lesser-known aspects of World War II was the use of encrypted communications. Behind the static of Nazi radio transmissions, there was an ongoing game of secrecy, deception, and coded messages that left cryptic marks in history. Nazi Germany had a vast network of radio stations, some of which were used for propaganda, others for military coordination, but some were purposefully shrouded in enigma. What were they trying to conceal? And more importantly, what secrets lie hidden in those coded transmissions? Throughout the war, the Nazi regime maintained a well-developed system of radio communications. Radio stations played a pivotal role in relaying orders, spreading propaganda, and connecting the far-flung units of the Third Reich. These stations spanned from occupied France to remote corners of Eastern Europe, with some even hidden deep in the heart of the mountains or underground bunkers. While many of these stations were simply used to broadcast standard messages to the public, others harbored a deeper purpose, one that remains shrouded in mystery. Some of the most fascinating stories surrounding these Nazi radio stations are linked to the secret codes transmitted in the dead of night. They were not just random noise or casual chatter. The codes were carefully constructed sequences of seemingly meaningless symbols, short bursts of transmission, or numerical sequences. A form of communication only understood by those who had the right key to decode them. What were these hidden messages? And what were the Nazis trying to hide behind the static of their broadcasts? In the midst of the war, the Allies cracked the infamous Enigma code, which allowed them to intercept and decode the messages between high-ranking Nazi officials and military leaders. Yet, for all the success of the Allies' cryptographic efforts, there were still countless other transmissions that remained indecipherable. Some were short, intermittent bursts of numbers, letters, and phrases, believed to be part of a larger encrypted message. Others were seemingly random bursts of static, too short and irregular to catch the attention of even the most advanced cryptanalysts of the time. What could this strange behavior mean? Why were the Nazis using such cryptic methods? One intriguing theory is that these broadcasts were a form of covert communication for Nazi spies operating behind enemy lines. There are accounts of secretive agents embedded within neutral countries or enemy territories receiving these coded signals. These agents, in turn, were expected to decipher the messages and pass the information along to their superiors, often through clandestine means. Was this secret radio network an early precursor to modern-day spy communication? Or was there something even more profound lurking behind these messages? The most famous of these cryptic radio transmissions are linked to a series of strange broadcasts known as number stations. These stations became notorious in the post-war period, but their origins can be traced back to Nazi Germany. At the time, these broadcasts were often assumed to be routine military communications. However, as the war progressed, the sheer frequency and complexity of these transmissions became increasingly suspicious. Were the Nazis sending out critical strategic information in plain sight, disguised as innocuous numbers or static? Or was the real purpose of these stations something far more secretive? One theory suggests that these broadcasts may have been used to conceal the movements of secret Nazi projects. Could these cryptic signals have been guiding the locations of hidden weapons or laboratories, like the infamous Die Glock, the mysterious Nazi bell? As we know, the Nazis were involved in the development of several groundbreaking technologies, some of which remain subjects of speculation to this day. Could these broadcasts have been a way to relay instructions or coordinates for these classified sites? Some have even speculated that these coded messages might have been connected to larger, more mystical goals, such as the potential location of long-lost Nazi treasures or even the remnants of occult knowledge. But it wasn't just the Germans who were involved in this web of mysterious communications. The Allies, too, were attuned to the signals coming from Nazi radio stations. There are records of intercepted transmissions that baffled Allied cryptographers, messages that were never decoded, despite the best efforts of some of the brightest minds at Bletchley Park. Was this simply a failure of Allied cryptographic capabilities? Or was there a more deliberate effort on the part of the Nazis to hide their most sensitive secrets? A particularly curious aspect of these broadcasts is the belief that some stations were transmitting not only in code but also in an untraceable language. Some have argued that the Nazis were employing a form of unbreakable encryption, one that used shifting, unpredictable patterns, perhaps based on principles that went beyond conventional mathematics. These theories suggest that some of these messages were intentionally made cryptic, not merely to conceal military strategies, but to mask the existence of something even more enigmatic. One popular but largely speculative theory is that some of these Nazi radio signals were tied to a greater, almost mystical objective. There were rumors throughout the war that Nazi leaders were using the sciences, occultism, and secret societies to guide their efforts toward a greater goal, perhaps even one that transcended the war itself. The possibility that some of these coded transmissions were designed to communicate with hidden forces or to unlock knowledge deemed forbidden remains a tantalizing but unprovable idea. Was the Nazis' cryptic communication network a mere wartime tool, or could it have been part of a larger, otherworldly plan? Despite the Allied victory, the legacy of these mysterious radio broadcasts remains. After the war, some of the station's locations were identified, and a few attempts were made to uncover the nature of the secret messages they transmitted. Yet many of the broadcasts, especially those that were less understood and appeared to be isolated incidents, remain a puzzle. Could the Nazis have hidden messages that were meant to resurface after the war? Were there still active sleeper cells that awaited instructions years after the Allies had declared victory? Or was it possible that some of these radio stations were simply experimenting with newer forms of encrypted communication, attempting to create a system so complex it would never be deciphered? Perhaps the most chilling aspect of these coded messages is the uncertainty that still surrounds them. It is unclear how many of these broadcasts were intercepted, and even more unclear what, if anything, they were meant to convey. What if the messages themselves were not just about military movements or espionage, but instead something more significant, something that, once decoded, could change our understanding of WW2 history forever? The secret codes and hidden messages from Nazi radio stations remain some of the most puzzling and unexplained elements of the war. Even now, decades later, they continue to draw the attention of researchers and historians. What truths might still lie hidden in these encrypted signals buried beneath layers of time and secrecy? What is still out there, waiting to be uncovered? The answers may be locked away forever, or perhaps, with the right key, they are closer than we think. The concept of world domination, for many, is the stuff of dystopian fiction or the fevered dreams of megalomaniacs. But during the dark days of World War II, the Nazis under Adolf Hitler entertained this very idea with chilling seriousness. The question that lingers even today is whether this grand ambition ever truly took shape, or if it was merely the delusional thinking of a totalitarian regime bent on global conquest. As the war escalated, so did the reach and the audacity of Nazi plans, many of which still remain shrouded in secrecy and speculation. At the core of Nazi ideology was the idea of Lebensraum, the notion that the German people needed more living space, a vast territory to the east that would ensure their dominance in Europe. The initial stages of this plan were focused on the conquest of neighboring countries, as evidenced by the swift German invasions of Poland, France, and beyond. Yet, as the war wore on and the Nazi Empire expanded, it became clear that Hitler had far more ambitious ideas, ones that stretched well beyond the borders of Europe. It's often said that power breeds ambition, and Hitler's vision extended into what might be considered the most audacious strategy of all, the global domination of a new world order. The Nazis didn't just want to conquer Europe. They dreamed of a new totalitarian empire that would stretch across the globe, with Germany at its center. But was this a plan that was ever set into motion, or merely the ravings of an increasingly unstable dictator? To understand the scope of this plan, it's important to examine the Nazis' approach to world domination through their military and ideological policies. First and foremost was the creation of an Aryan master race, a racially pure society that would reign supreme over the rest of the world. This racial hierarchy was not merely an abstract idea, but a concrete part of Nazi policy, woven into their military strategies and geopolitical ambitions. But the notion of a master race was not enough. In the pursuit of domination, the Nazis sought to systematically reshape the global political order, turning the world into a battleground for their version of racial supremacy. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Nazi plan for domination was the development of what could be termed scientific imperialism. This was not just about military conquest, but also about the exploitation of science, technology, and ideology to control vast populations. The Nazis were obsessed with the idea of controlling knowledge, the power of scientific discovery to reshape the world, and they pursued this goal through a range of highly secretive projects. The famous Ahnenerbe research group, for example, was tasked with uncovering ancient mysteries and finding a way to justify the Nazi racial narrative through archaeological and anthropological studies. These pseudo-scientific explorations were not just academic in nature. They were part of a larger vision of creating an unassailable Nazi empire. In parallel with these cultural and ideological objectives, the Nazis were also quietly working on military plans that could have set them on a path to global domination. Operation Celian, the planned invasion of Great Britain, was one of the most famous and most ambitious military operations of the war. Had it succeeded, it would have placed Hitler's forces in control of the British Isles, a key step in the Nazis' plan to dominate Europe. While Celian was ultimately abandoned due to the failure to establish air superiority over the English Channel, it was merely one part of a much broader strategy to control Europe, and, from there, to reach beyond it. The question then arises, was Hitler's vision truly global in scale? Documents recovered after the war suggest that the Nazis did indeed have far-reaching plans for conquest beyond Europe. One of the more chilling documents that surfaced after the fall of Berlin was the General Plan Ost, a secret blueprint for the mass colonization of Eastern Europe. This plan called for the systematic ethnic cleansing of millions of people in the Soviet Union and the establishment of a German-dominated racially pure empire that would last for centuries. But what few realize is that the Nazis were not only planning to control Europe, they were laying the groundwork for global control, with particular interest in the Americas and the Pacific. It is here that the lines between speculation and documented history blur. One theory, largely based on post-war analysis, suggests that the Nazis, aware of their limited resources and technological limitations, were exploring the possibility of forming alliances with other powers to challenge the United States and the Soviet Union for global supremacy. This was not limited to European powers. Nazi ideology had already developed a peculiar view of other parts of the world, particularly Asia. The Nazis had formed a complex, though often contradictory, relationship with Japan, with both powers engaging in diplomatic negotiations and military coordination. The Axis was more than just a military alliance. It was, in some ways, a shared vision of a new world order that could topple the old colonial empires and place these new totalitarian regimes at the helm. Were there plans to establish a Fourth Reich beyond Europe, with a foothold in the Americas or the Pacific? Some researchers point to the presence of German operatives and sympathizers in places as far afield as South America and Southeast Asia, suggesting that the Nazis were attempting to establish a network of influence that could one day challenge the Allies' global dominance. The infamous rat lines, escape routes that allowed Nazi officials to flee Europe after the war, are often seen as part of this broader strategy, allowing high-ranking officials to establish themselves in new regions and sow the seeds for future Nazi resurgence. But did these ideas go beyond speculation? Was there ever a true attempt to extend Nazi power beyond Europe? This is a question that remains unresolved. The sheer scale of the Nazi ambition suggests that such plans were in the works, but the end of the war and the collapse of the Third Reich shattered those possibilities. Yet some believe that the Nazis, ever the pragmatists, may have simply adjusted their goals, recognizing that their dream of world domination could not be realized in the immediate aftermath of the war. Perhaps, they reasoned, a slow, insidious process of global influence through science, propaganda, and alliances might one day bring them the dominance they so desired. As we examine these plans, it becomes clear that the true scope of the Nazi effort to dominate the world may never be fully understood. While we know that the Nazis sought to conquer Europe, the question of whether they truly had a blueprint for global rule is far murkier. The vast documentation left behind in the aftermath of the war, coupled with scattered reports of covert operations, suggests that their ambitions may have extended well beyond what history has traditionally recognized. Were there secret Nazi agents embedded in foreign governments? Were there covert plans in place for a global Nazi resurgence? What remains of these ambitions today? The pieces of this puzzle, scattered across continents and buried in secret archives, may hold the answer. But for now, the full truth of the Nazis' dream of world domination remains an unsolved mystery. As we shift our focus from global Nazi ambitions, another chapter of World War II's mysterious and often overlooked history beckons, a chapter that continues to elude a complete understanding. It was the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, a confrontation that took place in the vast expanse of the Pacific in March of 1943. And yet, even today, many questions remain unanswered about what truly transpired during this key engagement. To this day, historians and military experts have debated the full scope of what occurred during this battle, and some even question whether all the facts have been revealed. What happened in that remote corner of the world? The Bismarck Sea, a stretch of water between New Guinea and the islands of the Bismarck archipelago, became the stage for one of the most decisive aerial battles of the Pacific War. It was here that Allied forces, primarily Australian and American forces, decisively struck a convoy of Japanese ships, sinking several vessels and dealing a massive blow to the Japanese Imperial Army. The battle is often touted as a classic example of Allied dominance in the air and their ability to strike the Japanese at their most vulnerable. The outcome seemed straightforward, a victory for the Allies, with the Japanese losing critical resources, including troops and military supplies. On the surface, the battle seemed clear-cut, but as with many of World War II's most significant encounters, there are parts of this battle that are not so easily explained. What began as a well-executed aerial assault quickly spirals into a series of questions that have yet to be fully answered. How did the Allies manage to find the convoy with such precision? Was the Japanese fleet entirely caught off guard? Or was there something else at play? One of the most striking aspects of the Battle of the Bismarck Sea was the almost uncanny accuracy with which the Allies were able to locate and decimate the Japanese convoy. The Japanese fleet had been moving under strict radio silence, with the hope that the Allies would have difficulty locating them. But despite these precautions, American B-17 Flying Fortress bombers, along with Australian and American fighter planes, were able to strike with deadly precision. Within hours, 5 Japanese ships were sunk and many more were damaged. The success of the attack was so overwhelming that some military analysts and historians began to wonder, could the Allies have known more about the fleet's movements than they were letting on? This leads us to one of the more speculative aspects of the battle, the role of intelligence and possible espionage. Was it a case of sheer military genius, or was there a hidden hand guiding the Allies to their target? There are rumors, still circulating to this day, that Allied forces had received information from sources within the Japanese ranks. Some historians suggest that the Japanese, plagued by internal divisions and distrust, may have been the target of an intelligence leak. Was there someone in their ranks willing to betray them for the right price? And if so, how much did this inside information factor into the success of the Allied attack? Further compounding the mystery is the odd behavior of the Japanese commanders during the battle. The Japanese forces had been making extensive preparations for the convoy's journey, but when the attack came, there was little sign of organized resistance. Their response was swift but chaotic, and several of their ships were sunk in the process. Why were the Japanese unable to mount a coherent defense when they had been known for their fierce and calculated counterattacks in previous battles? Were they simply caught off guard, or was there something more to the story, something that the Allies were not fully aware of at the time? Another intriguing element lies in the aftermath of the battle. While the losses were devastating for the Japanese, many believed that the battle could have been far worse. Despite the sinking of several ships and the loss of many soldiers, a considerable portion of the convoy managed to escape and reach the safety of New Guinea. This raises yet another question. Was the battle truly as decisive as it was made out to be, or did the Japanese manage to minimize the damage in ways that were never fully understood? One theory, not fully substantiated, speculates that the Japanese were intentionally leaving certain ships vulnerable in order to create a diversion for a larger operation elsewhere. This would suggest that the Japanese commanders had a secondary plan, one that was not immediately obvious to their opponents at the time. If this theory holds any weight, then the Battle of the Bismarck Sea could have been more of a tactical withdrawal than a complete defeat. Could it be that, while the Allies celebrated their victory, the Japanese were already preparing for a larger and more significant strike in the coming months? Additionally, there are whispers of the Japanese forces engaging in a broader strategy that sought to bait the Allies into certain locations, where they could be ambushed in future engagements. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea, as critical as it was, might have been only one piece of a much larger puzzle, one that the Allies were never fully able to piece together. As with many mysteries of World War II, the fog of war often prevents us from reaching a clear conclusion. What is clear, however, is the lasting impact of this battle. Not only did it significantly hinder the Japanese's ability to continue their operations in the Pacific, but it also demonstrated the increasing dominance of Allied air forces over the Pacific theater. But beyond the facts, what remains unexplained is the true scope of the intelligence networks at play, the strategic decisions made in the hours leading up to the battle, and whether the Japanese were more prepared than history suggests. Did the Japanese commanders have more information than they let on? Could there have been a hidden agenda behind the battle's chaotic nature? And what role did espionage, leaks, and counterintelligence play in this critical encounter? While many of the details of the Battle of the Bismarck Sea are known, these lingering questions remain unresolved. The pieces of this military puzzle may never fully fit together. For now, the mystery persists, leaving us to wonder what truly happened in that remote stretch of the Pacific. As we shift our gaze to the tangled web of espionage in the Pacific during World War II, another story, one of secrecy and disappearance, begins to unfold. It is a tale that raises questions more than it answers. A story that has slipped through the cracks of history, much like the man at its center. His name was Captain Edward R. L. Wilson, an American intelligence officer whose fate remains one of the enduring mysteries of the war. What happened to this American spy who vanished in the Philippines? And why has his disappearance remained so shrouded in uncertainty? The Philippines in 1944 was a hotbed of intrigue and tension. The archipelago, strategically positioned in the Pacific, was caught in the crossfire between the Japanese imperial forces and the Allies, who were working relentlessly to push the Japanese back. But it was not just military battles that raged on these islands. Behind the scenes, a quiet war of intelligence and deception unfolded. The Allies had spies embedded throughout the region, gathering crucial information on Japanese movements and operations. Wilson was one such spy, sent on a mission so secretive that even now the full details remain obscured. Wilson's mission was to help facilitate the Allied return to the Philippines. As part of his assignment, he was tasked with coordinating intelligence on Japanese positions and assisting local resistance groups who had been operating under the radar. However, after an initial successful mission, Wilson vanished without a trace. The last known contact with him came during a dangerous infiltration operation in the heart of Japanese-controlled territory, A routine transmission confirmed his survival, but then nothing. No sign of him. No trace of his body. No subsequent radio messages. He simply disappeared. At first, there were whispers that he had been captured. It was not unusual for spies to be taken by enemy forces, especially in the dense jungles and rugged mountains of the Philippines. But there was no evidence of a prisoner exchange or any captured Americans that could have been Wilson. No photographs, no statements. His name seemed to disappear from the record, like a page torn from a classified report. What makes this disappearance even more perplexing is the silence surrounding it. Unlike the cases of other missing spies, there were no significant efforts to locate Wilson, and his disappearance never sparked the kind of public or military investigation that one might expect. Was it because his mission had failed? Or was there something more that the military wanted to keep hidden? And what if Wilson had stumbled upon something far more dangerous than the Japanese forces, something that his superiors didn't want exposed? Some speculate that Captain Wilson may have uncovered a secret operation, a covert agreement between the Japanese and a third party that was kept out of the public eye. Could Wilson have been eliminated for what he knew? It is entirely possible that his sudden disappearance was orchestrated to prevent the exposure of an intelligence leak, or worse, an impending shift in the war that could have had catastrophic consequences. Others suggest that Wilson's disappearance was part of a broader intelligence operation, a case where he might have been deliberately disappeared by his own government. It's a strange theory, but in the complex world of wartime espionage, nothing is ever fully what it seems. Could he have been made to vanish so that he could operate more freely under an assumed identity, gathering even deeper secrets behind enemy lines? Some theorize that Wilson's disappearance was a cover story for a far more intricate web of operations, and that his survival was, in fact, part of a larger mission to infiltrate higher levels of Japanese military command. But the true nature of his fate remains a mystery. Did he die in the jungles of the Philippines, never to be seen again? Did he fall victim to the merciless hands of the Japanese, or perhaps succumb to the elements in a place where even the most seasoned soldiers would have struggled to survive? Or, as some dark theories suggest, was Wilson's disappearance part of a more calculated scheme designed to remove him from the chessboard entirely? One chilling possibility is that Wilson may have crossed paths with a faction within the Japanese army that operated under an entirely different set of rules, those interested in more than just military victory. Theories of secret Japanese experiments, hidden agendas, and alternative plans for a post-war world abound in the margins of history. Was Wilson's mission connected to these deeper, darker currents? Did he uncover something so sinister that it led to his quiet elimination? The nature of espionage often ensures that the truth is never fully revealed, but Wilson's case stands out because of the absence of concrete answers. There were no dramatic last-minute rescues, no heroic stories of survival against the odds. His fate was swallowed by the fog of war, and the evidence has remained elusive for over 7 decades. What we do know is that Wilson's disappearance became a footnote, buried under the chaos of the larger war effort. Unlike the high-profile disappearances of other spies, his case failed to capture the public's imagination or spark a national outcry. Perhaps there was simply too much else happening at the time for the military to devote significant resources to finding one man. But the silence, the lack of closure, only deepens the mystery. Was Captain Edward R.L. Wilson a victim of wartime necessity, or was his disappearance part of a much larger, more enigmatic plot? What did he know, and who wanted it kept hidden? The answers remain just beyond our grasp, buried somewhere in the jungles of the Philippines, lost in time, and obscured by the secrecy of wartime intelligence operations. Though the full truth of Wilson's fate may never come to light, his story is a poignant reminder of the countless unsung heroes of World War II, men and women who, like him, walked in the shadows of history. What remains clear is that the mystery of Captain Wilson's disappearance is a dark, unresolved chapter in the complex history of wartime espionage, and it may well be one that we will never fully solve. As the tide of World War II began to turn in favor of the Allies, a different kind of battle was being waged in the shadows, one that would leave a deep and lasting imprint on the course of history. It wasn't fought on the beaches of Normandy or in the jungles of the Pacific, but rather in the laboratories and research facilities hidden beneath the surface of both Axis and Allied nations. This was the war of minds, of secret projects and technological innovations that could alter the balance of power in ways that were as terrifying as they were extraordinary. Among the most secretive and controversial operations that emerged from this period was Operation Paperclip. A covert mission born from the wreckage of Nazi Germany, Paperclip was not about soldiers or spies, but about scientists, brilliant men who had once fought for the Third Reich, but whose expertise was now sought after by the United States in the aftermath of Germany's defeat. The operation itself began in 1945, as the Allies swept through Europe, discovering the full extent of Nazi scientific and technological advancements. It was clear that the Germans had been working on projects that were far ahead of anything the Allies had achieved, from advanced rocketry to chemical warfare. But there was more. The Nazis were also rumored to have developed weapons and technologies that were both unconventional and dangerous, projects that might change the course of warfare forever. The United States, eager to harness this knowledge and prevent it from falling into the hands of the Soviet Union, launched Operation Paperclip, a program designed to bring over 1,600 German scientists and engineers to work for the U.S. government. What made this operation so controversial was not just the recruitment of former Nazis, but the dark questions that it raised. Was the desire for technological advancement worth the moral cost of sheltering men whose loyalty had once been pledged to a regime responsible for some of history's most horrific atrocities? Many of these scientists, including figures like Wernher von Braun, who would go on to help develop the U.S. space program, had been deeply involved in the Nazi war machine. Von Braun, for instance, had developed the V2 rocket, which was used to target civilian populations in London. Yet, despite their pasts, these men were not only given a pass by the U.S. government, but were welcomed with open arms. The stories surrounding Operation Paperclip are as murky as the motivations behind it. Officially, these scientists were brought to the United States under the guise of advancing national security and scientific development. Their work in the post-war years, particularly in the fields of rocketry, aviation, and weapons technology, certainly seemed to justify the move. But the program also raised unsettling questions about the lengths to which the U.S. government was willing to go to secure victory in the Cold War. In the case of Wernher von Braun, it is clear that his work had a profound impact on the future of American space exploration. His guidance led to the development of the Redstone and Atlas missiles, which played a crucial role in the early stages of the U.S. space program. The rockets he helped design would eventually carry astronauts to the moon, a feat that seemed to eclipse his Nazi past. Yet, there is something deeply unsettling about the fact that the U.S. government was willing to turn a blind eye to the ethical implications of bringing in scientists with such a dark history. This willingness to overlook past affiliations was not limited to von Braun. Among the most chilling examples of Operation Paperclip were the so-called doctors who had worked in Nazi concentration camps. These individuals had been involved in some of the most grotesque and inhumane experiments of the war, yet they too were brought into the fold by the Americans. Their expertise in biological and chemical warfare was seen as a potential asset, even if the moral implications of their work were, at best, troubling. Some of the most fascinating and disturbing aspects of Operation Paperclip center around the secret projects that these scientists were involved in after their arrival in the U.S. The most well-known of these is the development of the Manhattan Project, which produced the world's first atomic bomb. While this was not a direct result of Nazi technology, some of the key figures who worked on the Manhattan Project had been recruited through Operation Paperclip, including physicist Kurt Diebner, who had been involved in Germany's own atomic research. This raises the question, to what extent did the knowledge gleaned from Nazi research influence the development of nuclear weapons by the United States? Was the U.S. simply capitalizing on the intellectual capital of the Nazis? Or was there a deeper, more sinister exchange of information taking place? In the realm of rocketry, the contributions of the German scientists were even more pronounced. The V2 rocket, developed by von Braun and his team, was the first long-range guided ballistic missile. After the war, many of the German engineers and scientists who had worked on the V2 program were relocated to the U.S. and set to work on developing similar technologies. This led to the creation of the U.S. Army's missile programs, which would eventually form the foundation for both America's space exploration and its military rocket programs. Yet, the questions linger. How much of the Nazi war machine's knowledge and technological prowess was transferred in these secret exchanges? And what did the U.S. government turn a blind eye to in order to secure such a wealth of information? While the Operation Paperclip scientists certainly helped the U.S. maintain a technological edge, some theories suggest that their true role went beyond mere scientific advancement. Some believe that the U.S. government, in its pursuit of superiority during the Cold War, may have been complicit in perpetuating the scientific legacies of Nazi experimentation. Were these scientists simply talented individuals, or were they carrying with them the dark influence of Nazi ideology? Could the technologies they brought with them have been designed not just to win the war, but to secure control over a new kind of warfare, one that blurred the line between science and ethics? As we dig deeper into the shadows of Operation Paperclip, we must ask, were the technological advancements we gained from these Nazi scientists truly worth the price? And to what extent did the U.S. government's desire to stay ahead in the Cold War blur the line between ethical boundaries and scientific progress? With so many unanswered questions surrounding Operation Paperclip, it is clear that the full extent of its impact, both on the course of American history and on the lives of those who participated in it, remains shrouded in secrecy. The story of Operation Paperclip is a story of both triumph and moral ambiguity. But the deeper we go into the hidden corners of this operation, the more we are left to wonder how much of the Nazi legacy still lingers in the world of science and technology today. What other secrets might have been swept under the rug, concealed in the name of progress? And perhaps, most disturbingly, what other truths, yet to be uncovered, remain buried in the dark history of this operation? The answers may be closer than we think. As the years went on, Adolf Hitler's grip on the German war machine grew tighter. His vision for the Third Reich, once a source of remarkable hope for some, became an obsession that spiraled into a nightmare for millions. His decisions, driven by ideology, ambition, and an almost supernatural belief in his own infallibility, shaped the course of World War II. But was Hitler truly the mastermind behind every move he made? Or, as some have suggested, were there hidden forces operating behind the scenes, subtly influencing or even directing his decisions? In the cold corridors of power in Nazi Germany, it's not hard to imagine a shadowy network of figures, advisors, occultists, and power players, quietly pulling the strings, swaying Hitler's mind, and guiding the course of the war. At first glance, this may seem like an absurd suggestion. Hitler was, after all, the Führer, undisputed, unchallenged, and at the height of his control. However, as we peel back the layers of history, we begin to uncover whispers of influences, both internal and external, that seem to have shaped his strategies and choices in ways that cannot be easily explained by traditional politics alone. One of the most enduring mysteries of Hitler's decision-making is his involvement with the occult. Historians have long debated the extent to which Nazi ideology was intertwined with mystical beliefs, but many of the Führer's actions seem to suggest that these esoteric forces played a far greater role in his thinking than has been acknowledged. From the Nazi obsession with Aryan supremacy and ancient Germanic myths to the establishment of occult symbols like the swastika, Hitler's relationship with the supernatural remains one of the most enigmatic aspects of his rule. Was he influenced by the ideas of the Thule Society, a secretive group that mixed nationalism, mysticism, and occult rituals? Some researchers claim that the Thule Society's beliefs, centered around the idea that the Aryan race had roots in a mythical, lost civilization, helped shape Hitler's racial policies and military ambitions. It's even said that he sought out artifacts of immense power, including the fabled Spear of Destiny, which was believed to grant its possessor great power and influence. Whether or not Hitler genuinely believed in these ancient relics or saw them merely as symbols of authority is a question that remains open to speculation. But it is undeniable that the occult played a role in shaping his mindset and perhaps his decisions. Adding to this is the curious case of Hitler's inner circle. While the Führer's control over the Nazi regime was absolute, many of his closest advisors and generals were far more pragmatic, often at odds with his increasingly erratic decisions. High-ranking military officials, such as Field Marshal Erwin Rommel and General Heinz Guderian, had vastly different strategic ideas than their leader, yet they followed orders. Could it be that these men, many of whom were extremely capable military minds, simply went along with Hitler's vision out of fear? Or was there something more? Some believe that certain factions within the Nazi Party, particularly the SS under Heinrich Himmler, had a far greater influence on Hitler's decisions than has been previously acknowledged. Himmler himself was deeply involved in the occult and had a profound interest in Germanic history, mysticism, and even the supernatural. His obsession with the esoteric extended to the creation of the Ahnenerbe, a research institution dedicated to studying ancient civilizations and attempting to uncover evidence of Aryan superiority. Some argue that Himmler's fascination with occult practices influenced Hitler's decisions, particularly in the later stages of the war when more irrational and extreme ideas took hold. It's said that Himmler pushed Hitler to pursue increasingly outlandish and impractical projects, such as the development of wonder weapons, advanced technologies that were meant to turn the tide of war, but which ultimately proved to be nothing more than expensive failures. However, the influence of these hidden forces is not confined solely to Nazi Germany. There are those who claim that Hitler's rise to power was part of a larger, more international plot. Some conspiracy theorists suggest that hidden powers within global finance, industry, and even the British government secretly supported Hitler's rise, using him as a tool to weaken Germany and later Europe. The idea that Hitler was a pawn of a greater global network is a theory that has been largely dismissed by mainstream historians. Yet some compelling evidence exists to suggest that certain figures in international finance saw the Nazis as a useful means to an end. The most famous and controversial of these theories centers on the possibility that Wall Street played a role in financing Hitler's early rise to power. Some researchers have pointed to financial ties between American banks and German industrialists who supported Hitler's regime, arguing that these financial interests had a vested interest in keeping Germany on its feet during the early years of the Nazi regime. This is a claim that has been heavily scrutinized and largely debunked by historians. But the idea that international financial interests may have quietly backed Hitler's rise remains a persistent and unsettling question. Then there is the question of foreign intelligence services and the possible role they played in shaping Hitler's decisions. The most intriguing suggestion involves the British, who, according to some reports, may have used covert channels to indirectly manipulate Nazi policy. The theory suggests that certain factions within British intelligence, particularly MI6, saw Hitler as a way to distract and weaken Germany, forcing it into conflict with the Soviet Union and ultimately leading to the downfall of both regimes. Could the British have known, in some strange twist of fate, that Hitler's ambition would not only ensure the defeat of Nazi Germany, but also strengthen the Western Allies in the long run? Another mysterious aspect of Hitler's decision-making relates to his fascination with certain leaders and figures. Throughout his time in power, Hitler was influenced by the actions and strategies of other dictators, such as Benito Mussolini. Yet, he also appeared to be under the sway of figures like Joseph Stalin, whose ruthlessness and ideological purity may have inspired Hitler's own approach to warfare and governance. Was it possible that, in his desire to dominate the world, Hitler was not only responding to immediate threats, but was also, in some way, guided by a desire to mirror or even surpass the power of those who had come before him? As we delve deeper into the psychological and ideological forces that shaped Hitler's decisions, one thing becomes clear. The Führer's thoughts and strategies were not merely the product of his own mind, but were influenced by an intricate web of forces. Hidden factions, whether within Nazi Germany or from beyond its borders, seem to have had a subtle yet undeniable influence on the direction of the war and the decisions Hitler made. The enigma of Hitler's motivations, the influences upon his mind, and the shadowy figures that may have guided him are questions that remain, at best, partially answered. And as we continue to unravel the mysteries of World War II, we can only wonder, how much of Hitler's decision-making was his own, and how much was shaped by forces far more powerful and secretive than we have yet come to understand? The answers, it seems, may remain hidden beneath the surface of history, waiting to be uncovered. As the war ground to a close, the Third Reich was crumbling. The relentless advance of Allied forces from both the East and West was closing in on the heart of Nazi Germany. In the final days of World War II, with Hitler's regime teetering on the edge of collapse, a question that had long haunted the corridors of power took center stage. Where was the vast wealth, particularly the gold, of the Third Reich? Some believe that in those desperate moments before Germany's surrender, a hidden treasure was carefully concealed, locked away in secret vaults or buried in the earth, waiting for discovery. Throughout the war, the Nazi regime had amassed an extraordinary fortune, including gold reserves looted from central banks, occupied countries, and the Jewish people. The Reich's gold was part of an intricate web of wealth used to fund their military ambitions, to silence their enemies, and to fuel the machine of Nazi power. But as the final days of the war drew near, it seemed that this fortune had vanished, leaving behind only mysteries and unanswered questions. In the final months of the war, as the Allies closed in on Berlin, Nazi leaders scrambled to hide as much of the Reich's treasures as they could. The most famous of these treasures was, of course, the Nazi gold. The gold reserves were said to have been transported to various secret locations across Europe, some perhaps to the Swiss banks, which had long acted as the neutral, secure haven for illicit wealth. Others claim that the gold was sent to the far reaches of the Reich, to locations so remote they would remain hidden for decades to come. The story of this treasure begins with a series of mysterious disappearances. As the Allies stormed into Germany and the Soviet Union advanced from the east, reports emerged of massive convoys of trucks, trains, and ships moving under the cover of darkness, seemingly transporting valuable items. Some of these convoys were headed toward the Swiss border, while others seemed to be moving deeper into the mountains and forests of Germany and Austria. What were they carrying, and where did they go? One of the most intriguing reports comes from the small German town of Merkers, located in central Germany. In 1945, Allied troops discovered a massive stash of looted gold stored in a salt mine. The gold bars, coins, and other valuables were found hidden beneath the ground, alongside countless works of art looted from occupied territories. The discovery was nothing short of astounding, but it was only the tip of the iceberg. What about the other treasures, the ones that were never recovered? Could there be more caches hidden in plain sight? Speculation about Nazi gold has swirled for decades, with countless theories emerging about where it might be hidden. Some believe that the treasure was buried deep in the mountains of Austria, where members of the SS were rumored to have created secret bunkers and storage vaults. Others point to the mysterious town of St. Gallen in Switzerland, where rumors persist that a significant portion of the gold ended up in private hands, hidden within the vaults of Swiss banks, far beyond the reach of the Allies. But what about the possibility of Nazi officials, fleeing the collapse of the Reich, having hidden their treasure in the remote forests of southern Germany or Austria? According to some reports, high-ranking Nazis, including senior officials from the SS, disappeared into these dense forests after the war ended. Could it be that they had hidden large caches of gold in these seemingly inhospitable regions? Some believe that the treasure is buried in secluded locations, far from the eyes of the world, perhaps deep within caves or beneath the soil, just waiting to be unearthed. One particularly curious theory involves the town of Hurtgen Forest, a place that has been tied to both military history and strange happenings since the war. According to some, the forest could be the location of one of the greatest unsolved treasures in history. This theory is supported by the fact that, during the war, the area was a site of heavy fighting, with Nazi officials possibly using the chaos of the battle to conceal their treasure. In recent years, treasure hunters have flocked to various suspected locations, armed with metal detectors, maps, and years of research. They've scoured the remote valleys and treacherous hills of central and southern Germany, following old reports, documents, and whispers of those who claim to know the truth. Yet, despite their efforts, no one has found definitive proof of the massive troves of gold that are believed to still lie buried, forgotten, and waiting for someone to uncover them. One of the most tantalizing aspects of this mystery is the idea that the treasure may have been intentionally hidden by Nazi officials who were keenly aware that the Allies would stop at nothing to find it. Did they have a plan in place for its concealment? Were certain high-ranking Nazis, perhaps even Adolf Hitler himself, aware that this treasure would one day be sought out by future generations, kept secret in the hope that its discovery would one day serve a political purpose? Were there secret deals with certain post-war powers to keep the treasure hidden, locked away behind walls of secrecy? Theories about the ultimate fate of Nazi gold stretch far beyond the borders of Germany. Some argue that the treasure was shipped across the globe, buried in far-flung places such as South America, or even stashed in the remote islands of the Pacific. The possibility of gold being hidden in remote parts of South America is not as far-fetched as it may seem, especially considering that numerous Nazi war criminals were believed to have fled to the region following the war's end. Could they have taken the gold with them, hiding it among the dense jungles or beneath the waves of the ocean? While many claims about Nazi gold are no more than legend or exaggeration, there are those who still believe the treasure exists, and that it is waiting to be uncovered. Treasure hunters, historians, and amateur sleuths continue to search for the lost hoards, driven by the belief that there is a final piece to the puzzle of WW2 history that still remains hidden, perhaps buried under layers of soil or forgotten deep beneath the waves. What is the truth behind the vanished Nazi gold? Could it still be waiting, hidden in plain sight, waiting for a curious soul to find it? Or has it already been lost to the world forever, hidden so well that it remains out of reach, forever beyond our grasp? The answers may never come, and the treasure may remain locked in the shadows of history, a mystery for future generations to unravel if they can. The British intelligence services during World War II were a labyrinthine network of secretive operatives, cryptographers, and spies working tirelessly behind the scenes to unravel the mysteries of the enemy's movements and intentions. But for all the revelations that have surfaced over the years, there remains a veil of secrecy surrounding the true extent of British intelligence operations during the war. What methods did they employ to stay one step ahead? What techniques remain undisclosed to this day, hidden from public view for reasons still unclear? As the war escalated, the British government understood that intelligence would be the key to victory. To counter the might of the German military and their technological innovations, Britain turned to a highly sophisticated system of espionage, code breaking, and psychological manipulation. It wasn't just about intercepting messages, it was about interpreting the subtle signals, understanding the motivations of the enemy, and staying ahead in a battle of wits. The most famous of these operations was the breaking of the German Enigma code. At Bletchley Park, a once quiet mansion in the English countryside, a team of code breakers, led by figures like Alan Turing, cracked the codes that were thought unbreakable. This breakthrough is often hailed as one of the greatest successes in military intelligence history, shortening the war by years and saving countless lives. But even this story, one that we now look back on with admiration, holds its own mysteries. What other secrets were hidden in the files of Bletchley Park, waiting to be discovered? What did the British really know about the movements of the Axis powers, and how did they use this knowledge to manipulate the course of the war? There are whispers that even as the Allies worked to break codes, they were simultaneously perfecting their own methods of deception. From the use of double agents to the forging of fake documents, British intelligence engaged in psychological warfare as much as they did in code breaking. One of the most intriguing aspects of this deception came in the form of Operation Fortitude, a colossal effort to mislead the German military about the location of the D-Day invasion. Using fake radio transmissions, inflatable tanks, and phantom armies, the British convinced the Nazis that the invasion would take place at Pas-de-Calais, far from the actual landing sites in Normandy. The success of this operation has been credited with saving countless lives, but how much of it was truly the result of brilliant strategy, and how much was due to sheer luck? Even more mysterious is the question of the special forces within British intelligence. MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service, has long been synonymous with espionage. However, much of its work during the war remains classified. While the stories of spies like Kim Philby and the Cambridge Five are well documented, there are other, lesser-known figures whose contributions have been obscured. Were there covert operations that never reached the public eye? Intelligence-gathering networks so effective that they remain shrouded in secrecy? And what about the use of psychological techniques to manipulate both enemy soldiers and civilians? British intelligence officers were said to have used a variety of covert tactics, including spreading misinformation and manipulating public opinion to sow discord within enemy ranks. But how far did these operations really go? The methods used by British intelligence during WWII weren't solely reliant on human agents or coded messages. There were technological innovations that have remained largely undisclosed to this day. One of the most fascinating aspects of British intelligence was the work being done in the shadows of radar technology. The British developed radar early in the war, giving them an edge in detecting incoming German aircraft. But what about the technology that the public never heard about? Was Britain working on more advanced methods of surveillance, devices so cutting-edge that even today they remain under wraps? How did these technologies shape the intelligence-gathering processes of the war, and how much of that knowledge was preserved or erased after the conflict ended? The British also operated a network of highly classified special missions, including the daring sabotage operations carried out by the Special Operations Executive, SOE. These missions, often undertaken in enemy territories, were cloaked in secrecy, involving dangerous sabotage, infiltration, and assassination. But how many of these operations truly succeeded, and how many of them failed without ever being publicly acknowledged? There are stories of agents who went missing, operations that were deemed too risky to be pursued, and other missions so secret that they have been erased from the history books altogether. Were some of these missions conducted with the aid of advanced technology or techniques not revealed to the public? As we look deeper into the vast network of British intelligence during WWII, the mystery only deepens. The roles of figures like Winston Churchill, who had a hand in overseeing the intelligence operations, are often discussed. But there are also claims that certain individuals in the highest echelons of government knew more than they let on. Did Churchill, for instance, have access to intelligence that was too sensitive to release? How much of what was known was kept from the public, and why? The secrecy surrounding these matters adds a layer of intrigue that persists to this day. Perhaps the most perplexing question of all is, how much of British intelligence was shaped by its hidden alliances with other nations? It's known that the United States and Britain shared a great deal of intelligence during the war, but were there other, more shadowy alliances that have remained undisturbed, their full implications only to be realized in future generations? Were certain intelligence methods, perhaps even espionage techniques, exchanged with non-allied nations in exchange for critical information? Could there be covert operations whose existence has been deliberately suppressed, buried beneath layers of secrecy to protect the integrity of post-war diplomacy? British intelligence in World War II was a formidable force, but the methods it employed remain a tangled web, incomplete and, in many cases, beyond our reach. As much as we have learned about the brilliance of Bletchley Park and the ingenuity of deception operations like Fortitude, there is still so much we do not know. The true depth of British intelligence's operations during the war may never be fully revealed, its methods too intricate, its secrecy too carefully guarded. But as we continue to unearth the forgotten corners of history, we are left to wonder, what other secrets are still hidden in the shadows of the past, waiting to be uncovered? What truths might British intelligence have known that have yet to surface? As the war raged across Europe and beyond, one of the most critical components of military strategy was the ability to communicate securely. The Allies and the Axis powers alike relied heavily on secret codes, ciphers, and encrypted messages to outwit and outmaneuver their enemies. Yet, as we now know, Nazi Germany's use of intelligence and cryptography was more sophisticated than many initially realized. Behind the veil of Nazi secrecy, there lay a vast, intricate web of codes and cryptographic systems that the Allies struggled to crack. It is said that the Nazis played a deadly game of deception, using their ciphers not just to relay military orders, but to manipulate their enemies' perception of reality. One of the most famous examples of this is the Enigma machine, a seemingly innocuous device that would go on to become the center of one of the most significant intelligence battles of the war. The Enigma, a cipher machine developed by the Germans in the early 1920s, was initially designed for civilian use. However, the Nazis quickly adapted it for military purposes, making it their primary means of encrypting messages. The machine's complexity was staggering. Each letter of the alphabet could be substituted by any of 150 quintillion possible settings, making the code nearly impossible to crack. To any outsider, it seemed as though the Nazi message system was impenetrable. For years, the Allies struggled to decode the seemingly endless streams of intercepted German transmissions. But the Nazis, convinced of their invincibility, remained unaware that their encrypted messages were being captured, analyzed, and eventually broken by an unlikely group of mathematicians, cryptanalysts, and codebreakers, many of whom were stationed at Bletchley Park in Britain. The breaking of the Enigma code became one of the defining moments of the war, a key turning point that allowed the Allies to anticipate German movements and frustrate their operations. Yet, despite the eventual success in cracking this crucial code, it remains a mystery how deeply the Nazis embedded their intelligence networks and how many more ciphers they might have had, hidden from the prying eyes of their enemies. As we dig deeper into the realm of Nazi intelligence, it becomes clear that the Enigma machine was only the tip of the iceberg. In fact, the Nazis employed a variety of ciphers and secret communications, many of which remain shrouded in mystery to this day. One particularly enigmatic aspect of their intelligence operations was the use of one-time pads, an unbreakable encryption method that required the key to be destroyed after a single use. The Nazis made use of this technique for particularly sensitive communications, rendering these messages completely unreadable to anyone who didn't possess the key. Could the Allies have intercepted more crucial intelligence during the war if they had managed to crack these more advanced systems? But perhaps the most fascinating and most obscure aspect of Nazi cryptography lies in the question of how they managed to keep their ciphers so effective for so long. While the Enigma machine was eventually broken, it wasn't a straightforward process. The Allies had to rely on a combination of technological ingenuity, luck, and human error to make headway. The question that arises from this success is, how much of this was due to the brilliance of Nazi cryptographers, and how much was the result of the Allies' own efforts to deceive and mislead the Nazis into thinking their codes were unbreakable? Many speculate that the Nazis were well aware of the possibility of their ciphers being compromised. Did they intentionally introduce deliberate errors or false messages into their encrypted communications, hoping to mislead the Allies into focusing on the wrong targets or wasting valuable resources on decoding false information? Could the so-called phony war of early 1940, in which the Allies and Germans engaged in limited direct combat, have been a larger part of a sophisticated intelligence strategy designed to confuse and misdirect? This line of thinking leads to further speculation. Could the Nazis have used complex ciphers to control not only military operations, but also political and strategic decision-making in ways that the Allies were unaware of? In the last months of the war, the Germans engaged in an extensive campaign of misinformation to hide the true state of their military position from the Allies. At the same time, there were reports that the Nazis employed coded messages to keep internal power struggles and even the leadership of the Third Reich itself in a state of confusion. What if the sophisticated encryption was not just for military purposes, but also for the political control of a crumbling empire? The involvement of Nazi high command in this web of deception is a subject of much debate. The Nazis were known to have a high degree of compartmentalization within their intelligence networks, but some have argued that this secrecy may have led to critical intelligence failures, as individual officers or organizations operated in isolation without knowledge of others. Was there a more significant layer to the Nazi intelligence apparatus that the Allies, distracted by their focus on breaking the Enigma, overlooked? Could there have been a more insidious network of informants and double agents operating within the German ranks, feeding false intelligence into their own system? Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of the mystery surrounding Nazi intelligence is the question of what became of their cryptographic resources after the war. As the Allies advanced into Germany, vast quantities of documents, intelligence materials, and cryptographic machines were captured or destroyed. However, despite this, there are still reports of cryptographic devices and ciphers turning up in unexpected places in the post-war years. Did the Nazis have a network of loyalists who continued their efforts even in the aftermath of the war? Or were there hidden caches of intelligence resources that, for reasons unknown, remained concealed from Allied forces? Could there be missing ciphers or encrypted messages from the Nazi regime that we still have yet to uncover? In many ways, the full extent of the Nazis' cryptographic genius and the depths of their intelligence network remains a mystery to this day. The complexity of their codes, the sophistication of their ciphers, and the potential for misdirection they introduced into their communications all contribute to a narrative of wartime deception that remains open-ended. For all the progress we've made in understanding the war, it's clear that there is still so much hidden in the shadows, a web of secrets that may never be fully uncovered. Perhaps the real story behind Nazi intelligence isn't just the codes they cracked, but the ones that remain unsolved, hidden beneath layers of time, waiting to be discovered. As the dark clouds of war gathered across Europe in the late 1930s, few could have predicted that the conflict would not only reshape nations, but also sow the seeds for a web of international conspiracies that would extend far beyond the battlefield. World War II, a conflict marked by shifting alliances, covert operations, and intelligence battles, gave rise to countless secrets, some now lost to history, others still very much in play today. But was the war itself the beginning of a series of complex and secretive movements that influenced global politics long after the guns had fallen silent? The end of WWII saw the formation of new global power structures. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers. The United Nations was created in an attempt to prevent future wars, and the world's largest military alliances, such as NATO and the Warsaw Pact, took shape. But beyond these widely accepted changes, there were undercurrents of secrecy and covert actions that, to this day, fuel debates and fuel conspiracy theories about the true machinations behind many post-war decisions. Was it just the war that led to the emergence of these clandestine organizations? Or had they already been operating long before? Let's begin with a question that often lingers in the darker corners of wartime history. Did the war itself create the very conditions in which global conspiracies could thrive? One of the most well-documented conspiracies to have emerged in the wake of WWII is the influence of secret societies like the Illuminati and the Freemasons, and their alleged connections to the major political and corporate powers that shaped the post-war world. According to some, the disarray caused by the war provided the perfect cover for covert organizations to strengthen their influence, infiltrate new governments, and consolidate power on a global scale. This theory posits that the war's upheaval allowed hidden elites to guide the formation of international institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the World Bank, and even the nascent European Union, giving rise to suspicions that these institutions may have been shaped by hidden, shadowy powers working behind the scenes. For many, the rise of secret intelligence organizations, such as the CIA, MI6, and the KGB, also points to the birth of a new type of international conspiracy that transcends national borders. During the war, espionage had played a critical role, with spies operating not only in the heart of enemy territories, but also within neutral nations. The war provided the perfect proving ground for the world's most advanced intelligence agencies, and, in its aftermath, the need for intelligence networks only deepened. Yet questions remain. Did these agencies ever truly work in the public interest, or were they instrumental in pushing covert agendas that served the interests of hidden powers? Take, for example, Operation Paperclip, the secretive American program that brought Nazi scientists, engineers, and intelligence officers into the fold of U.S. research projects. Officially, Paperclip was intended to harness the scientific expertise of the Nazis for the Cold War, but beneath the surface, there are lingering questions about how much of this recruitment was tied to deeper, more secretive interests. Were the U.S. government and its allies merely interested in winning the race for technological supremacy, or did these ex-Nazi officials possess knowledge of long-buried secrets, secrets that, if revealed, might change the course of world events? One such theory involves the concept of Nazi occultism, the belief that certain Nazi leaders, particularly Heinrich Himmler, were deeply involved in the occult, and that their interest in esoteric knowledge and symbols might have influenced not only their military strategy, but also their long-term goals. Was there, perhaps, a hidden agenda behind their fascination with ancient symbols and secret knowledge that had not been fully exposed? Some conspiracy theorists suggest that the Nazis were pursuing a kind of superweapon, the creation of which was based on a mixture of advanced technology, mysticism, and esoteric science. What if the war then wasn't just a battle for territory, but also for knowledge that had been deliberately hidden from the masses, knowledge that continues to influence international relations today? As the war wound down, and as the Allies raced to secure the remnants of Nazi Germany's scientific and military assets, another theory began to emerge. The idea that the war had set the stage for a larger, far-reaching conspiracy involving the world's most powerful corporations. The theory suggests that multinational companies, particularly in the oil, arms, and pharmaceutical sectors, had been playing a much larger role in shaping global politics than most people realized. For instance, were the multinational corporations of the post-war era indirectly involved in propelling the global Cold War agenda? Did they secretly sponsor political movements and control the flow of resources to ensure the continued dominance of the United States and the Soviet Union? In parallel, some conspiracy theorists argue that the formation of the United Nations and the subsequent rise of international bureaucracies were part of a long-term plan to shift control from sovereign governments to a centralized global elite. In this theory, global institutions like the UN were not created to protect peace and democracy, but rather to create a framework for control. Control over the global economy, the flow of information, and ultimately the direction of human history. Was the peace forged after WWII truly genuine? Or was it another means of reinforcing global conspiracies that had been set in motion during the war itself? Even the very post-war structure of the world economy, with its deep reliance on the IMF, the World Bank, and the global trade system, has prompted some to wonder whether these organizations are part of a larger web of conspiratorial control. Were these institutions designed to maintain the financial dominance of certain nations and thus perpetuate a cycle of global dependency? But what about the so-called deep state, a concept often mentioned in modern political discussions? Some historians argue that the origins of the deep state as we understand it today can be traced back to World War II. Were the covert organizations that emerged during the war, such as the CIA and MI6, merely extensions of earlier secret societies or the result of wartime necessity? Did the war give birth to a new global deep state, one that has continued to operate in the shadows ever since? Of course, these questions don't have simple answers, and many of these theories remain the subject of intense debate. The secrecy surrounding wartime operations, along with the sudden appearance of powerful global organizations, continues to leave us with more questions than answers. What is clear, however, is that World War II was more than just a conflict between nations. It was the crucible in which the modern international order was forged, a new era of global politics that, for all its transparency, remains riddled with mysteries. As we ponder the ramifications of the war, we are left to wonder, how much of our world today, with its shifting alliances and covert operations, was shaped in the shadows of the conflict, and how many of these secretive forces continue to influence global events, even now hidden just beneath the surface?